CD 13.
The discussion among the Gwiggle people continues, with many stories offered to explain this spirit and these strange men. But still, it is a mystery for the Gwiggle people, who must try nevertheless to carry out their spiritual duty to country by protecting country, only allowing strangers to pass through their land with the clan's consent, which can only be granted after spiritual communication and ceremony. Perhaps they will go as quickly and as mysteriously as they have come. It seems not. 1st of May 1770, Sutherland Point, sleeping shores and glassy bays. Captain Cook wakes on this first day of May to terrible news. One of the sailors, Forby Sutherland, who has been suffering for some time from tuberculosis and has been under the care of Surgeon Monkhouse, has died overnight. With some ceremony, Forby's body is wrapped in canvas and taken on deck, where Captain Cook calls the company together and says prayers over his body. Thereafter the young man's body is buried ashore at the watering place, which, the captain records, occasioned my calling the south point of this bay after his name. Yes, this will be Sutherland Point, for a fine sailor, the first Briton to lie at rest on Gwiggle land. So Forby Sutherland becomes far more famous in death than in life. His body in a far more foreign land than any Scotsman has seen. His body to lie forever in a land he never set foot upon. After some quiet reflection, Cook heads into the woods to investigate the discovery of some more native huts, this time leaving a different combination of trinkets which he hopes might please them, consisting of cloth, looking-glasses, combs, beads, nails, etc. That accomplished, and now in the company of Mr. Banks, Dr. Solander, and 10 armed sailors, Captain Cook heads north, making an excursion into the country, which we found diversified with woods, lawns, and marshes. The woods are free from underwood, of every kind, and the trees are at such a distance from one another that the whole country, or at least great part of it, might be cultivated without being obliged to cut down a single tree. Which is the good news. The bad news is that there seems a good reason there is not a lot of undergrowth, as noted by Joseph Banks. The soil, wherever we saw it, consisted of either swamps or light sandy soil, on which grew very few species of trees. Establishing a colony here capable of feeding itself through its own agricultural endeavours might be possible, but in terms of the fertility of the soil, this part of the coast is not like Tahiti, where you could plant a toothpick and grow a pine tree, plant a nail and grow a crowbar. But oh, the bursting nature of the nature here! Traipsing through the thick bush, the whir of crickets ringing in their ears. They also find the dung of a large animal that had fed on grass, which much resembled that of a stag. Also the footsteps of an animal clawed like a dog or wolf, and as large as the latter, and of a small animal whose feet were like those of a polecat or weasel. Banks and Solander are ecstatic. What a glorious change from New Zealand, where, despite its glorious bird life, the seeming pinnacle of the animal kingdom had been the dog, followed by the only other quadruped to be found on those islands, the rat. But New Holland? In one short excursion, they have seen one unknown creature and the prints of 3 more. In the air, whole flocks of strange birds fly by in such extraordinary numbers, and of such diversity. Colourful birds, crested birds, clamorous birds, birds that Banks affirms he has never seen before, that the Englishman himself is all aflutter, even as his heart soars on high. As for the new plants they are finding, it is nothing less than extraordinary, unprecedented, and barely of this world. Seemingly with every step they find a new one, so many in fact that Mr. Banks and Dr. Solander decide that they must split up, so they can cover more area, snipping new specimens at a rate unknown to both of them, in fact unknown in the history of this burgeoning glorious science of botany. In one way or another, it is clear that this is botanizing heaven in a way they could never have imagined. It becomes equally clear as they move through the bushland that the natives do not live by hunting and fishing alone. Clearly, agriculture, or at least a partial taming of the bush, also helps to provide some of their food. "I saw some trees," Cook notes, "that had been cut down by the natives with some sort of blunt instrument, and several trees that were barked, the bark of which had been cut by the same instrument. In many of the trees, especially the palms, were cut steps of about 3 or 4 feet asunder." For his part, Joseph Banks is intrigued by these notches in the tree trunks, which lead up to the canopy, and agrees with the captain that they must be to help the locals climb up. But to what end exactly? To throw their spears from the treetops? Or to sneak up upon birds, though that seems unlikely. James Cook supposes there is much more to these people than meets the eye. If only he could actually meet with them, sit down, look them in the eye, and make them understand that the English have not come to hurt them. But for the moment they remain flitting figures in the distance, and the closest encounter he has on this morning is seeing the black back and flashing white soles of a lone native fleeing. Lieutenant Gore's experience this morning is quite the opposite. On an excursion to the shore with a midshipman to gather up the succulent oysters that abound in these parts, Gore brashly decides to send the boat away. "Yes, that's right. We will walk back through the bush, along the native paths, just the two of us, to the watering place at the south head. We can signal you from there to come and pick us up, so keep a lookout. After all, it's not far, and we are not alone." Whirling around, Lieutenant Gore and the midshipman see a couple of dozen natives following them, with remarkable stealth, from a distance of just 20 yards. They are heavily armed with spears, and, upon being spotted, begin constantly parleying, but never daring to attack. Shortly after this encounter, Lieutenant Gore and the midshipman run into Dr. Solander, Surgeon Monkhouse, and 2 others, about half a mile from the watering place, whereupon unfolds an extraordinary pas de deux between the white men and the black men in the teeming, whirring bush, each fascinated by the other, yet fearful of what might happen. When Lieutenant Gore and the 3 others, more curious perhaps than prudent, approach the natives, they get close enough to see individual facial features, their bodies lean and raw-boned, their chests adorned with white paint. It is at this point that some of the natives pretend to be afraid and start to run, perhaps in the hope of luring the white men further forward, only for the natives who remain to suddenly fling 4 spears, which go an extraordinary 40 yards, landing just beyond Lieutenant Gore and his men. It is almost as if the natives want to scare but not hurt them, like a shot across the bow. That done, the natives gather up their spears and the Indians retired slowly, or so it seems. Arriving back at the watering place, in the mid-afternoon, Lieutenant Gore informs Captain Cook, in his light American lilt, what happened. The captain is fascinated, and losing not a moment, sets out with the doctor and Tupia in hot pursuit of the natives, hoping to make contact. And yet, as before, once they try to come close, the natives appear to simply melt into the bush and disappear. It is not that they retreat or run away, for there is neither any sense of great activity or fear. It is just that they are here, and now they are gone. It is as if they are of the land, not merely on it, and can become one with it as they like. As before, Cook gives up pursuing. The episode is every bit as remarkable as it is remarkably frustrating. The longer they spend in this strange land filled with extraordinary plants, animals, fish, and natives, the clearer it becomes that it is not just men with white skin the natives want nothing to do with, for as Banks chronicles his adventures that evening, "Tupia, who strayed from us in pursuit of parrots, of which he shot several, told us on his return that he had seen 9 Indians who ran from him as soon as they perceived him." Everything here is different, sort of front to back, topsy-turvy and upside down, down under. In New Zealand, Tupaia had been celebrated as a near demigod. Here in New Holland he is every bit as much a pariah as Cook and all the other white men. With no adulation to lift his spirits, he appears to sink ever lower, with only Taieto able to comfort him. 3rd of May, 1770, Botany Bay. Cook and Banks try again. This morning, Captain Cook sits at the back of the pinnace, with Mr. Banks and the doctor up the front, while they are rowed to the head of the bay. Today they intend to make a landing, with the specific purpose of meeting with natives and exploring the country. As they glide across the sparkling blue water, the eddying calm peace, occasionally disturbed by the ripples of what Dr. Solander identifies as a breaching stingray, they pass by a dozen natives, in a dozen canoes with their spears poised, over darting schools of fish. Now, just a few days ago, natives like this had barely blinked even as something the size of the Endeavour had passed by. Back then, they had not decided what to make of the visitors, thinking them a visitation from the spirit world, here to visit and go. So they had just kept on doing what they had been doing. Now, they scarper at the first approach of the strangers. And so Cook and his men proceed, the sailors bending to their oars, and the officers and gentlemen tending to their chores, drawing, sketching rough maps, observing, taking notes, then landing at the head of the bay and walking inland, gazing in wonder at the many strange and exotic plants, stopping at the call of new birds, 2 loud types the naturalists call lorikeets and cockatoos, always busy discussing all they see, collecting samples, sniffing, touching, occasionally tasting, but overall reeling from the sheer volume of new nature. Once again, these lands look promising for England and natural history. With his musket, the shooting of which he has continued to practice, Tupaia brings down several of the birds so they can be more closely inspected. When one of the lorikeets proves to be only lightly winged, the peripatetic priest claims it as a pet, allowing Sidney Parkinson to capture even more perfectly its beautiful plumage. It can be kept in one of the cages Mr. Banks has brought for this very purpose, and even allowed to flutter around the great cabin when the windows and doors are all closed and the ship's cat is put outside. "We found the face of the country very much the same as I have before described," Cook notes, "but the land much richer, for instead of sand, I have found in many places a deep black soil, which we thought was capable of producing any kind of grain. At present it produces, besides timber, as fine meadow as ever was seen. The stone is sandy, and very proper for building, etc." As they are rowed back towards the Endeavour, Captain Cook sees something of interest. Look, over there. It is thin plumes of smoke coming from fires on a far beach which, on closer inspection, has 6 native canoes pulled up just beyond the water's edge. Perfect. As eager as ever to make contact with these natives of New Holland, James Cook orders the men to row over. Alas, just as he has now come to expect, the natives disappear, well before the bow of the boat nudges onto the soft white sand. Alighting, anyway, the Englishmen find themselves just in time for a meal to which they have not been invited. Each of the 6 disappeared native men had made their own small fire to cook their fish, but the shellfish remain broiling on the coals, perfectly cooked and ready for the slurping. Captain Cook decides to enjoy the repast regardless. "We tasted of their cheer, and left them in return strings of beads, etc. The day being now far spent, we set out on our return to the ship." Back on board the Endeavour, Mr. Banks and the doctor bring their latest discoveries to the great cabin, whose cup of fresh discoveries now does runneth over. One by one, Banks and his entourage pull new and strange things from their collecting containers and place them at their own end of the huge table. For yes, while Captain Cook and his officers are charting an overview of the world at one end of the table, the Banks Brigade are at the other, on the prow of charting the world up close, recording its natural history. They truly have found it all here in this fine bay, everything from the fish and boundless stingrays to the mussels, parrots and quail, and particularly interesting to Banks, a tree bearing a fruit that resembles cherries. After observing the natives eat them, so too do the sailors, which pleases Captain Cook, as whatever else, they are fresh and should help against the scurvy. When it comes to plants generally, there are so many that Banks's key worry is that they will spoil before being properly catalogued and preserved. The solution, he decides, lies by way of a spare sail. With sailors lending a hand, they take a staggering 5,000 specimens of flowers to the shore, where on this calm, warm day they begin to lie them out on a sail to further dry in the sun. It is an exacting process to lie them all out and then remove the top sheet of paper to further expose them to the sun's rays. But by mid-morning it is done, and for the rest of the day the moisture which risks rotting them on the journey back to England is gently burned from them as they are regularly turned over. Once again, while Banks and his men are going about their business, a dozen or so native canoes come near, fishing. We soon saw that the people in them were employed in striking fish. They came within about half a mile of us, intent on their own employments and not at all regarding us. How could it be that these strange beings are not fascinated by a young Englishman drying plants? What is wrong with them? Well, the main thing is that the whole process is uninterrupted, and as the sun starts to wane, all the specimens are gathered once more and carefully pressed back into their quires before being loaded back into the folders. By this means, Banks chronicles, they came on board at night in very good condition. With the plant specimens now secured, Banks is more keen than ever to gather yet more, and is ashore again the following day, collecting more specimens in the bush, where again the local natives ignore them. By this time Banks declares himself quite void of fear, as our neighbours have turned out such rank cowards, rather than the brave, cunning, poison spear-wielding natives he had first supposed. Captain Cook and the other crew members do not take such a bold view, and continue to treat the natives with a great deal of caution, and many of them believe the lack of desire for interaction they show is nothing to do with cowardice, and everything to do with the unique manner and being of this people. How can the Endeavour sail next to a canoe and a fisherman not even glance up? They are unique, and to a man like Joseph Banks, used to categorizing and labeling all of nature and man, they are an enigma he simply cannot get to the bottom of. It eats at the Englishman. It defies reason. Still, at least one interaction the next day, 4th of May, is of particular note. One of the midshipmen, who'd been straggling a long way behind a party that had been sent out by Captain Cook to try to form a connection with the natives, suddenly comes across something that few from the Endeavour have seen to this point close up. It is a woman. Yes, the crew had been disappointed early on that this was clearly going to be no Tahiti, no sexual free-for-all, and at least in New Zealand they had seen women up close, and a few lucky sailors had been able to have congress with them. Here, so far, the women have steered a wide berth around the visitors. The midshipman has been following a footpath through the bush and come around a corner when he happens upon a very old man and very old woman. The man with great bushy grey hair and long beard, the woman's hair tightly cropped, both of them with wrinkled countenances and sagging flesh, sitting together under a tree, minding some very young children. Though startled themselves and clearly fearful, perhaps they can sense the young Englishman's fear too, which reassures them that he is not likely to attack them. In fact, fascinated to be so close to them, he offers them the only gift he can muster, some of the parrots he has just shot. Taking a couple of them, he tries to place them in their hands, only to see them pull their hands back, in token either of extreme fear or disgust. The young Englishman is interested by the encounter and will tell Mr. Banks all about it. But for now, conscious that there are many men in canoes fishing nearby who might quickly come ashore if they see him, he decides it is better to bid them adieu and quickly join the others. Dr. Monkhouse's own experience on this day is less benign. In the company of a midshipman, he is following a path when, after emerging from a part of the bush with many thick thickets, they look up to see 6 native warriors just up ahead. Deciding to approach them, the ship's surgeon takes a few short steps towards them when, far from melting away as he had expected, one of the 6 suddenly shouts a single command, and, seemingly from out of nowhere, for they make no aggressive move, a spear lands right by the medico. Though shocked, neither Monkhouse nor the midshipman with him retreat. This seems to shock the natives even more, for it is they who now do precisely that, at some pace, leaving behind a young lad in the tree who it seems had thrown the spear on the native elder's command. This lad too, however, is extraordinary for the speed with which he now descends and disappears. Has the surgeon just survived an attempted ambush? Dr. Monkhouse is not sure. There is, of course, no way of knowing, but all up, it proves to be the last interaction anyone on the Endeavour has with the natives while they are here. The next day, Cook goes in search of them again, trekking inland and going around the shore, still eager to earn their trust and fulfil his orders from the Admiralty, but can find neither hide nor hair of them. Not that the day has been without some reward. In the evening, Captain Cook records, the yawl returned from fishing, having caught 2 stingrays weighing near 600 pounds. The great quantity of this sort of fish found in this place occasioned my giving it the name of Stingray Harbour. But now, Cook pauses for a moment. There is one thing that has been more impressive here than the stingrays, and Mr. Banks and Dr. Solander have been extraordinary in their endeavours to gather them. With that in mind, Captain Cook draws a line through his words and adds new small words above, so the sentence reads, "The great quantity of new plants, etc., Mr. Banks and Dr. Solander collected in this place, occasioned my giving it the name of Botany Bay." Yes, that's it. Not Stingray Harbour, and not Botanist Bay, but Botany Bay. It just has a great ring to it, and is the right name. After all, in even the brief time they have been here, just a little over a week, Mr. Banks and his entourage have discovered no fewer than 132 plant species, previously unknown to the scientific world. And in the end, the bay's sheer number of extraordinarily diverse plant types is marginally more impressive than the size and number of its stingrays. 6th of May, 1770, Botany Bay. Pass the port and miss the marvel. As magical as it all is, now that Captain Cook is confident that they have seen everything this place afforded, it is time to move on. The wood has been gathered, the water barrels filled, and the ship scrubbed clean from top to bottom. In terms of replenishing some of their supplies, they have caught a great deal of fish, one which the crew call leather jackets, together with the stingrays they've caught, and a great number of birds. Edible plant life has been much harder to come by, certainly nothing like the array of fruit they'd had in Tahiti, but that is no surprise. Nothing but Tahiti could be like Tahiti. Move on. And so, just after dawn on this bright day, the Endeavour men weigh anchor and put to sea, harnessing the light breeze from the northwest to move through the heads of Botany Bay, before picking up a southerly which pushes them easily north up the coast of New Holland. Now, in terms of mapping the coastline, things are different on this coast from the way they had been in New Zealand. There, it had been important to chart every nook and cranny, explore every indent, just in case the great southern land was attempting to hide from them. But here, a partial map of this land already exists, courtesy of the Dutch, and all Cook needs to do is to track the basic contours of the east coast. There is no imperative to document every indent because this coastline is clearly not the great southern land that Mr. Dalrymple is certain of, with its fabled mountains and rivers and fertile plains teeming with people. This is the completion of an old continent, not the discovery of a new one. So yes, although only 3 hours after setting sail, Cook notes the grand entrance to a very likely grand harbour, just 20 miles north of the entrance to the rather more modest heads of Botany Bay, it is no more than something of passing interest. We were by observation in the latitude of 33 degrees 50 minutes south, about 2 or 3 miles from the land, and abreast of a bay wherein there appeared to be safe anchorage, which I called Port Jackson. Yes, as a man raised in the Royal Navy, he has long been taught to pass the port to the left, but this is unfortunate. Banks, who is below cataloguing his plants, misses it entirely, merely noting, "The land we sailed past during the whole forenoon appeared broken and likely for harbours. In the afternoon again, woody and very pleasant." The opening Banks and Cook simply sailed past, 2 or 3 miles out, is actually a rather grand harbour. It will one day be named Sydney Harbour. It is the great non-discovery of Cook's life, an irony that he will never know. Chapter 11. Escapades on the East Coast. These people may truly be said to be in the pure state of nature, and may appear to some to be the most wretched upon earth. But in reality, they are far more happier than we Europeans, being wholly unacquainted with the superfluous, but also the necessary conveniences so much sought after in Europe. They are happy in not knowing the use of them. They live in a tranquillity which is not disturbed by the inequality of condition. The earth and sea of their own accord furnishes them with all things necessary for life. They covet not magnificent houses, household stuff, etc. They sleep as sound in a small hovel, or even in the open as the king in his palace on a bed of down. Captain Cook, upon his return from New Holland, to his former captain John Walker, 1771. Conversing with any but the most uncivilized savages, perhaps in the world. Joseph Banks, on the indigenous peoples of New Holland, 1770. 15th of May, 1770. A tolerable high point of land bore northwest by west, distant 3 miles. This point I named Cape Byron. The Endeavour cuts through the beauty of the blue coastal sea, sweeping past a foreign coastline full of high sandstone cliffs, jagged, crooked rocks that hang and jut in startlingly new yet still ancient patterns. Each novelty is carefully noted, as Captain Cook charts and Mr. Banks catalogues. And yet the hope for a satisfactory encounter with its natives starts to fade. On the 15th of May, 1770, they see a new group of natives on the shore, about 20 strong, each of which carried upon his back a large bundle of something which we conjectured to be palm leaves for covering their houses, and yet Banks despairingly notes the same stunning shunning, their refusal to acknowledge what to them must be an extraordinary spectacle. We observed them with glasses for near an hour. Not one was once observed to stop and look towards the ship. They pursued their way, in all appearance, entirely unmoved by the neighbourhood of so remarkable an object as a ship must necessarily be to people who have never seen one. Not one. Could you train 20 of His Majesty's Marines so well that in the course of an hour not one would turn his head once to gaze upon something thousands of times bigger than they have ever seen before? Unlikely. But for these natives of New Holland, it doesn't even seem to be a matter of discipline. They genuinely appear uninterested. By the 20th of May, the weather has demonstrably warmed as the Endeavour has come so far up the east coast that the Tropic of Capricorn beckons just 400 miles to the north. Captain Cook again sees so many natives crowded onto a headland, about 20 in all, that he names it Indian Head to mark the occasion. As ever, the natives do not care to become excited by the appearance of the Endeavour. 3 days later, the Endeavour drops anchor off Sandy Cape, having passed Harvey Bay, so that Mr. Banks and his people may go botanising. And Captain Cook too wishes to examine the hinterland. Not long after they have disappeared into the thick scrub, those aboard the Endeavour see 20 natives appear on the beach, and for once look their way for a short time before disappearing again. Having seen the smoke from several fires in the distance, Captain Cook and Mr. Banks approach one, and though the fire is burning when they arrive, all the natives are gone. It affords the Europeans at least the opportunity to get some idea of how the natives hereabouts live. Nearby are several vessels of bark, which we conceived were intended for water buckets, several shells and fish bones, the remainder, I suppose, of their last meal. And in fact, instead of one small fire, they see many small ones, just as they had seen on the beach at Botany Bay. 1 fire per man, all built in the lee of a bark barricade on its windward side, and by each one is a piece of upturned soft bark, perfect for a makeshift bed. The whole was in a thicket of close trees, defended by them from the wind. Whether it was really or not the place of their abode, we can only guess. We saw no signs of a house or anything like the ruins of an old one, and from the ground being much trod, we concluded that they had for some time remained in that place. Is this a village? Do these people have villages? Cook is uncertain, but Tupaia has a more definitive verdict. "Tata Inos," he says to Captain Cook and the gentleman with a look of pity. The white men know by now that means poor people, naked as they are, sleeping exposed. Yes, to some on the Endeavour the natives are savages, and yet it is not as if those on the ship don't have their own fair share of actually savage people. On the night of the 22nd of May, 1770, an episode occurs which rather demonstrates it. Richard Orton, Captain Cook's clerk, responsible for maintaining the muster, victualling and related duties, had been drinking with shipmates during some time off, and had indulged in such liberation of the libation that 2 things had happened. Firstly, he had fallen nearly insensible, and the second thing becomes more apparent the following morning, when Captain Cook's personal servant, William Howson, has to take only one look at him lying drunk in his bunk, that he races off to fetch the surgeon's mate, William Perry. That gentleman arrives to look closely and confirm the truth of it. Mr. Orton, his head completely covered in caked blood, has had a big chunk from both his ears sliced off in the night. It looks like he's been on the losing end of a wild dog-fight. Shaking him awake from the abysmal depths of his all but comatose drunken slumber, surgeon's mate Perry tells the fiercely complaining man that he has lost his ears. "I said, you have lost your ears." His mind still marinating in rum, Orton refuses to believe it, until Perry takes his looking-glass and holds it up for him. Through his bleary eyes, so weary, mere slits, Orton focuses just long enough to see the rather more damaging kind of slits that have been made where his whole ears used to be, and shouts, "Margra!" Yes, Orton has no doubt from the first who has done this to him. James Margra, the New Yorker midshipman with whom he has not only had a long-running enmity, but has quarrelled with the night before. Sensation on the ship. Captain Cook is called for, as is Surgeon William Monkhouse, to bind Orton's wounds. Upon arrival, the commander of the Endeavour, deeply aggrieved at this, the greatest insult that could be offered to my authority in this ship, starts to ask questions. What is clear from the first is that Orton had been heavily drinking on deck the night before, a calm night, and had quarrelled with several others. While he was staggering back to the hatchway to get to his bunk, on one dark part of the deck, Captain Cook concludes some malicious person or persons in the ship took advantage of his being drunk and cut off all the clothes from off his back. Not being satisfied with this, they some time after went into his cabin and cut off part of both his ears as he lay asleep in his bed. James Cook, of course, is appalled by the sheer bloody brutality of the act, but is reluctant to believe that Orton is correct in his accusation that the guilty man is indeed Midshipman James Margara. Yes, he had been with Orton on the evening, and yes, they had quarrelled. But a midshipman cutting off a large chunk of a clerk's ears? It is unthinkable, even if in England it used to be the punishment for a person spreading malicious rumours. Only in the backwoods of the American colonies is it still practised, which, come to think of it, is where Margara is from. But Captain Cook, a decent and mostly gentle man himself, has trouble believing in other officers being capable of this kind of viciousness, despite there being no doubt that someone had done it. Further inquiry, however, establishes that not only has Margara been inclined to cut off his own clothes when on one of his drunken frolics, but had been heard to say, as I was told, that if it was not for the law, he would murder Orton. Well then, these things considered induced me to think that Margara was not altogether innocent. For the moment, thus, Captain Cook dismisses him from the quarter-deck and suspends him from further duties. Margara is in any case the kind of gentleman, one of those gentlemen frequently found on board king's ships that can very well be spared, and, besides, it was necessary in me to show my immediate resentment against the person on whom the suspicion fell, lest they should not have stopped here. As to you, Mr. Orton, I say, as to you, Mr. Orton, as you take down your commander's dictation once more, Captain Cook concedes he is a man not without faults, yet, from all the inquiry I could make, it evidently appeared to me that so far from deserving such treatment, he had not designedly injured any person in the ship, so that I do and shall always look upon him as an injured man. For his part, Banks does not mention a thing in his journal about the whole curious affair. Had someone shorn the twigs off one of his shrubs, there would undoubtedly have been outrage on his part, and a page or more in his journal. But as Orton is not a rare plant, his pruning is of no interest to one Joseph Banks, Esquire. Banks aside, the gossip, rumblings, and rumours in the ship, the scandal of it, the violent crime committed on His Majesty's vessel, goes on for days. It is given another surge when, upon deeper consideration, the captain decides that, as there were no witnesses to the attack, and as recounted by William Perry, it being evident that a person wallowing in liquor, unconscious of hurt or pain, and ignorant until told of his own loss, could not possibly say who had assaulted him, Captain Cook relents. Midshipman James Margara is no longer under arrest, until such times as there is a confession or a witness might come forward. Getting someone to betray the butcher will not be easy, however, as everyone despised the poor suffering wretch, and the captain, who probably made private enquiries at the end of the week, knew no more than at the first moment of our surgeon's report. Perhaps a reward might help loosen lips. The captain puts up 10 guineas of his own money, and is pleased when his Lieutenant Zachary Hicks offers 5 guineas of his own for the cause. Lieutenant John Gore, however, who has a particular detestation for Orton and knows more than most about his criminal excesses and blasphemous sallies, as his own cabin adjoins the clerk's, declines to add any money and is blunt about it. "Sir," says he to Captain Cook, "it will be my duty to report whatever I may be told relating to transactions amiss on board. With respect to your mutilated clerk, I hope never to hear aught, and I will not give 6pence to encourage informers." Master Robert Molyneux, momentarily sober, is flattered to be asked, and gives a little, while Surgeon Monkhouse does the right thing and also puts in a few guineas of his own. In sum, a total of 15 guineas, more than a year's salary for an ordinary sailor, and 15 gallons of arrack is offered as reward for someone to come forward and bear witness, for whatever information might lead to fix and prove the guilt of Margaret or another. For the moment, that is where the matter rests. Orton resumes his duties, interspersed with heavy glaring at James Margaret whenever they cross paths, and the Endeavour sails on as before, though certainly few of the ship's company are disposed to spread rumours about Mr. Margaret. Fine man, and I won't hear a word against him, or repeat that word. 1st of June, 1770. On the topic of the Tropic of Capricorn. Scurvy is not one of those medical conditions that strikes suddenly. There is a reason why the French call it la grosse maladie. There is no instant pain, no waking up to find a horrible rash that has appeared overnight, no casual affliction. Rather, it creeps from the inside out, slowly corrupting the body. It first surfaces with a man who realizes he has been feeling off colour lately, with a sore mouth to boot. Complains, "I have swollen gums," Tupaia complains this evening, as Cook turns quiet. "I've had a sore mouth for nearly a fortnight." It is a real worry, and it deepens when Sidney Parkinson is also taken ill, with similarly worrying symptoms. Though New Holland has been a great provider of fresh fare in terms of fish, birds and animals, it has provided little in the way of fresh greens, with the exception of the small cherry-like fruit they found at Botany Bay, and the sauerkraut has only been able to keep the scurvy at bay for so long. And now Tupaia has had these symptoms of scurvy for a fortnight, without saying anything, only letting the condition take ever greater hold. An experienced sailor would have known the significance much more quickly than that, and Cook and his officers berate themselves for not having noticed Tupaia's suffering sooner. All that can be done for the moment is to consult the surgeon, who immediately put him upon taking extract of lemons in all his drink. In the meantime, Captain Cook concentrates on continuing up the coast of this extraordinary land, and is particularly impressed by the sheltered waters through which they are now travelling. "This passage I have named Whitsundays Passage, as it was discovered on the day the church commemorates that festival. It is formed by the main on the west, and by islands on the east. Our depth of water, in running through, was between 25 and 20 fathoms. Everywhere good anchorage, indeed the whole passage and one continued safe harbour." At one point, a small group of natives is spotted in the distance, but they show the usual interest in the Endeavour, none at all. The one thing Cook does know is that the Endeavour will have to stop soon, somewhere, to replenish their supply of fresh water. Having crossed the Tropic of Capricorn just today, it is not only hot, but getting hotter every day. If they can't find any water, they may have to gather and live off coconut milk. A week later, in the afternoon, they see some natives and canoes on a nearby island, which appears to have coconut trees. Lieutenant Hicks is dispatched to investigate the possibility of replenishing water barrels, or at least getting some coconuts, and Joseph Banks and the doctor take the opportunity to accompany him to gather specimens. Alas, when they return in the evening, it is with the usual news. They had seen no natives, and only heard them once, when they were pulling away from the shore. The natives' ability to disappear at will, even on a small island, appears to be almost in the realms of magic. Worse, there was no fresh water, and what were thought to be coconut trees proved to be nothing more than cabbage palms, milkless and useless to the Endeavour men. 9th of June, 1770. Off Cape Grafton, a novelty noticed. It is a group of natives actually showing curiosity in their visitors. Joseph Banks, particularly, is delighted to observe and be observed at last. In the morn, we passed within 1/4 mile of a small islet or rock, on which we saw with our glasses about 30 men, women, and children standing all together and looking attentively at us. The first people we have seen show any signs of curiosity at the sight of the ship. It is something, but Captain Cook, not wanting a repeat of the previous episode, where they had lost a day looking for natives and water for no result, decides they will sail on, looking for a better place to drop anchor. The fact that the natives appear more populous on this part of the coastline, and the foliage so green, means there must be fresh water nearby. 11th of June 1770, north of Cape Grafton, between a rock and a hard place. All quiet on the quarter-deck. All quiet below. The Endeavour surges through the bright ocean on this clear moonlight night, the moonbeams shining brightly upon the delightful phosphorescence in her wake. An hour before midnight, it only needs 14 men, under the command of the officer of the watch, to keep the Endeavour on course, some 6 or 7 leagues from the shore and heading northeast with a fine breeze of wind. Captain Cook, having altered course slightly to avoid islands he'd seen dead ahead in the last of the daylight. As a precaution against hitting shoals or shallow reef in the middle of the night, standard procedure is followed, with a sailor, placed at the bow, swinging a sounding lead, with a 12-pound piece of lead on one end, at the base of which is some sticky tallow, to determine both the depth of the seabed and even whether it is shale, sand, or weed. At the moment it is 20 fathoms, so nothing to worry about, particularly as their speed is only moderate. As everything is ship-shape and calm, Captain Cook, as is his wont, ensures that the watch is in place and alert, and retires for the night, pausing only to give his usual instructions that he be awakened for even the most minor of issues. "Yes, sir. Good night, sir." After many months at sea with no opportunity to scrape barnacles and growth from her hull, there is a drag, meaning the ship is only managing about 4 knots with this good breeze. All is almost eerily calm. Beyond the odd murmurs of the sailors to each other, and the odd muttered order by the lieutenant, "The breeze is freshening, Mr. Molyneux. Be ready to shorten sail," there is little sound heard, bar the 3 pine masts creaking happily under the light strain, as pine masts do in such benign conditions, the odd snap of the sails, the swish of the water, the lap of the waves hitting her starboard side, and what is that? A cry from the bow. Is it a cry from the goat, perhaps? I don't think so. Perhaps a sailor, then, measuring the depths and shouting a warning. The sound of waves breaking. There is no time to alter course. The Endeavour is a fully loaded vessel weighing well over 400 tons, under full sail, and travelling at 4 knots. It has a momentum all its own, and, given that it would take 15 minutes to take in all sail, stopping quickly is simply not remotely possible. Directly beneath the poop deck, in the great cabin, Joseph Banks is just lying his head upon his pillow. In his own room, beyond the vestibule separating them in the great cabin, Captain Cook is already sound asleep. Around and about him, forward, in the hold, about 60 crew are slumbering in their hammocks, rock-a-bye-byed by the endlessly comforting side-to-side motion of the ship rolling on the sudden swell, and now, from completely out of nowhere, for most of those on board, comes a massive physical shock, as 4 knots goes to nothing in a split second. Sailors tumble from their hammocks, and everything not tied down lurches forward, including the sheep, chooks, pigs, and the goat, all of whom squeal and squawk in protest. The air fills with the clang and crash of the crockery smashing on the wooden floor, the breaking of wood, the crunch of cannon breaking their moorings and hurtling into masts, followed near instantly by a shattering cacophony of oaths, cries of dismay, and, from above, the thunder of furiously flapping sails going nowhere. What has just happened? The bow of the Endeavour has suddenly run into, and up and over, a reef. For a reef it is. On deck, toppled sailors rise back to their feet, filling the sea-sprayed air with the shouting and cursing native to the sailor's tongue. Somewhere down below there is the angry yowling of a cat. Among the sailors and marines on the lower deck there are grunts, groans, curses, and sheer terror. The sails are like the jacks, all angry impotence furiously flapping in the wind to no effect. In the great cabin, the shock has been severe, and Joseph Banks has been awoken violently before being called up with the alarming news of the ship being fast ashore upon a rock, which she in a few moments convinced us of by beating very violently against the rocks. Cook has been similarly awoken, and gathering himself is quick to throw on his boots and gets topside, to see most of the sailors pouring out of the hatchway amidships. Some of those sailors pause to see the captain still in only his drawers, the undergarments in which he sleeps, but there is no time to reflect as he starts barking orders. "Take in all sail! Launch the boats! Mr. Satterley, below to check the damage to the hull." For many of the men have no sooner emerged from below decks than they are knocked over by the shaking of the ship as another wave crashes into the side. Captain Cook sees that the Endeavour is stuck fast on the coral, so it can neither rise nor fall with the swell, but only rock violently as the bigger waves wash over the sides and push jagged coral barbs ever deeper into the ship's hull. The sailors can hear the agony of the ship with every buffeting, feel it through the soles of their feet. The rip and roar of waves and rock compete in their terrors, each sound signalling a doom surely measured in moments. They are in desperate trouble. As the old salts know, the naturally abrasive nature of coral means that it is much worse than rock, as it is like a grinding machine that can splinter and smash even the stoutest hull in minutes. Their best hope is to be lifted off by the rising tide, but within 30 minutes, as more of the reef they are stuck on is revealed, it becomes clear they had hit at high tide and are definitively and definitely stuck, high and dry, though at least the last of the sails have been taken down, which helps lessen the flapping. Captain Cook, however, is not flapping at all. Yes, a brilliant navigator, maker of charts, and no doubt a more than able seaman. But above all, he is a leader of men, and the best chance they have to survive a crisis is through calm resolution. "Master Molyneux," he says, calmly, even above the roar of the waves and the violent rocking of the Endeavour, "lower the yawl to take soundings around her." Master Molyneux, with the aid of 4 good men, equally calm, does exactly as bidden, and is soon in the yawl with a lantern, being rowed about the stricken hull of the Endeavour to get a close-up look at just how it is stuck fast, and what precisely it is stuck fast upon, and to sound the depths, to see where the deepest exit route lies. All this time, Joseph Banks will note, she continued to beat very much so that we could hardly keep our legs upon the quarterdeck. By the light of the moon we could see her sheathing boards, etc., floating thick around her. They are in serious trouble. Their hull is being shredded to bits on the sharp reef, and all their collections, their celestial discoveries, their new charts, all the knowledge accrued over 2 years, looks every bit as doomed as their lives to be destroyed. Gasping from exertion, Master Molyneux climbs back up on deck with the news. All of it bad. A large outcrop of coral has penetrated the starboard bow of the Endeavour. If they do break free, the risk, or rather the perilous probability, is that they will leave a chunk of the hull on that reef, leaving a large hole for the water to pour through and sink them. For the moment, nothing can be done until the tide rises once more. At least, as the tide continues to drop, the Endeavour stabilizes on the reef and ceases to rock so violently, but as rests go, it is a notably uneasy one. And so, as Banks notes, all they can do is wait in the dark, listening as the coral continues grating her bottom, making a noise very plainly to be heard in the 4 storerooms. This, we doubted not, would make a hole in her bottom. We only hoped that it might not let in more water than we could clear with our pumps. The stream anchor is carried out to starboard, with the coasting anchor and cable, and both are soon taking the strain as the sailors turn the capstan and the windlass. All to no avail. They are stuck fast, and the water is gaining on the ship. In extremis, Captain Cook gives further orders. "Jettison everything we can that is not absolutely needed, starting with the heavy cannons. We have little under 12 hours until the next high tide, and when it comes, the Endeavour must be light enough that it lifts off the reef on which it is impaled." "Aye, aye, Captain." It takes a great deal of grimacing, grunting and groaning, but they are finally able to bring 4 of the 6 cannon they have on deck to the edge of the gangway and push them over, watching as they plummet to the shallow waters below. Typically, Captain Cook has insisted each cannon have a rope and buoy attached to it, so that if all goes well, they might be able to retrieve the cannon and get on with the journey, as well armed as previously. But no one, not even Cook, believes that the fates will be so kind to them. It is obvious to all that the cannon will lie there forever and a day. Following them just minutes later are the stone and iron ballast, the firewood, the pig iron, casks, and hoop staves, together with all decayed stores and the cannonballs. No less than 40 tons are thrown overboard. All this time, Banks notes, the seamen worked with surprising cheerfulness and alacrity. No grumbling or growling was to be heard throughout the ship, no, not even an oath, though the ship in general was as well furnished with them as most in His Majesty's service. Despite jettisoning the excess weight, the ship continues to take on water, and soon enough the level increases to as much as 2 pumps can handle. The men push and pull the pumps' levers, which are on the top deck right by the mainmast, with elm tree tubes leading down to the bilge. The sailors are put on tight shifts, manning the pumps to keep the water at bay, and where it belongs, back in the bay. Despite the grimness of their situation, there is no panic at all, as the officers behaved with inimitable coolness, void of all hurry and confusion. Keep pumping. Not only is Cook demonstrating calm leadership, but the ship's company he has formed over the last 22 months is behaving with admirable and even extraordinary poise. Joseph Banks, on the other hand, is far more realistic, deeply and obviously concerned first and foremost for Joseph Banks. Now, in my own opinion, I entirely gave up the ship, and packing up what I thought I might save, prepared myself for the worst. For though it seems likely they will soon be free of the reef as the coral outcrops start to thin, the fact remains she leaked so fast that with all our pumps we could just keep her free. The most likely thing thus is that once free, she must sink, and we well knew that our boats were not capable of carrying us all to shore, so that some, probably the most of us, must be drowned. Still the calm of the crew endures through the long night, and even beyond the dawn, when for the first time they can see that there is no island nearby, and their northeastern path has led them now 24 miles offshore, not remotely swimmable for those who don't get in the boats. And what would be the fate of those who do get to shore? Nobody from England knows where they are. Yes, there is a map of the shore they would land upon, but as it is the one that has just been made by James Cook, and is with them on the Endeavour, it is all rather beside the point. Well, if it did not prove to be a fatal shore, Banks concludes that even if those who made it there met with good usage from the natives and food to support them, they would still be debarred from a hope of ever again seeing their native country or conversing with any but the most uncivilized savages perhaps in the world. Mr. Banks is not at all sure whether it might not be better to drown in the first place. What is clear to all is that if they are to survive this, it will come from their own efforts right now, and that there is only one hope. All eyes and ears, bar the 2 missing ones, remain on the captain. Expecting the next high tide to peak at 11 a.m., they wait, doggedly preparing for the right moment. Slowly the sea starts to rise up the ship's sides, until it rises no more. To our great surprise, Captain Cook records, the tide did not rise high enough to accomplish this by a near 2 feet. At least as the tide once more begins to ebb, it gives them the time they need to further lighten the load, as more heavy things surplus to survival are hoiked overboard, including 2 more cannon. Pump, men! Pump! They work the pumps harder than ever. True, there is a good deal of swearing when it is realized that the wood of one of the pumps has rotted through, and it is useless. But all they can do is work the other pumps more vigorously. The problem is, the lower the ship sinks, the more the water rushes in. What is more, at noon, in the wake of the disappointing tide, the whole vessel is listing, 3 strakes keel to starboard, as in, it is 3 lateral planks deeper on the starboard side. The list is not yet so pronounced that the men slip over on the deck, but it would not want to go much further. At 5 p.m. the tide once more starts to rise, and the water begins to increase upon the ship so much that the 3rd pump must be put to work, and it is far from clear whether it will be able to keep up. This was an alarming and I may say terrible circumstance, Captain Cook will chronicle, and threatened immediate destruction to us. It is all a far cry from his prior most dire disaster as a commander, when his ship, Grenville, hit a shoal in the Thames estuary, and he was home by dinner-time regardless. That was child's play compared to this. On the reckoning that extreme circumstances require extreme action, that to do nothing is to guarantee their eventual destruction, Captain Cook now orders all 5 bow anchors to be dropped behind the ship in the hope they can haul themselves off the coral. The sailors scramble and the ship's boats are quickly lowered, bearing the anchors with attached heavy cables. I resolved to risk all, Cook will recount, and heave her off in case it was practical, and accordingly turned as many hands to the capstan and windlass as could be spared from the pumps. Banks writes with trepidation as they await their fate. The dreadful time approached, and the anxiety in everybody's countenance was visible enough. But there is no choice. Between certain death and likely death, a sane man must take action and vigorously pursue likely death. So, while some men continue to man the pumps, those in the boats take up their oars and row out to deploy the anchors on the starboard bow and quarter. The cables are pulled taut, and all remaining take the strain on the capstan and windlass and begin to turn. The strain on ropes, however severe, is more than matched by the strain on the men's faces, not merely from physical exertion, but because all realize they are likely either minutes from being shags on a rock, men clinging to a reef as their ship sinks, or possible salvation, and every turn of the wheel brings them closer to their fate. Will they be saved, or will their whole expedition end as an obscure scientific voyage that left Tahiti only to disappear somewhere in the vast Pacific? For Joseph Banks there appears no hope at all that the ship can be repaired, only that it can be kept afloat long enough that they can get it ashore, whereupon, out of her materials, we might build a vessel large enough to carry us to the East Indies. And pump, and pump, and pump, and stroke, and stroke, and stroke, and heave, and heave, and heave. The cables continue to strain to the point of breaking. Something has to give, and they can only hope it will be the ship coming off the reef intact. With every ounce of strength they have left, the men continue to haul on the windlass and capstan until, at about 20 minutes past 10, beneath a benevolent moon, there is a lurch, a groaning of timbers, another lurch, and the ship is suddenly moving, floating free. Well, if not quite free, it is at least off the reef and groggily, heavily bobbing in the ocean, a water-soaked log that moves slightly up and down with the swell rather than on it. As quick as they can now, those in the boats continue to pull on their oars, to get the Endeavour away from the reef, the midshipmen ready to quickly detach the ropes at their end in case she goes straight to the bottom. But she doesn't. She floats, after a fashion, in a manner. To our great satisfaction, Banks notes, she made no more water than she had done, which was indeed full as much as we could manage. His fears somewhat abated, Banks takes the opportunity to lie down on his bunk, the first opportunity in the last 24 hours since they had hit the reef, and rest. Alas, only a very short time after the head of Joseph Banks hits the silken pillow he has brought for the voyage, it happens. "Sir! Sir! Mr. Banks!" Banks is shaken awake to hear alarming news. "The ship has gained so much upon the pump, she has 4 feet of water in the hold." Good God. 4 feet. That can only mean they will all be heading 6 feet under, and more, within minutes. To make matters even more perilous, Mr. Banks is gravely informed by a panicked midshipman that the wind is blowing strongly from the nearest land, so that all hopes of running her ashore were totally cut off. Against that, the curious feature of the way Englishmen generally react to a completely hopeless situation now comes into play. For yes, the news could not be worse, but this, however, acted upon everybody like a charm. Rest was no more thought of, but the pumps went with unwearied vigour. All hands on deck, and both hands on the pump, with the only exception being John Thompson, the one-handed cook. Everyone else, from officers to boys, from gentlemen dandies to grizzled salts, works the pumps in a frenzy. By God, they might be about to drown, but as a point of honour they wanted to be in their own sweat before the sea has a chance to get to them. In this life-or-death situation, class divisions and ranks are forgotten. In the face of their Maker fighting to live, they are just men, and the only rank that counts is the physical strength needed to keep going. As Banks's dear friend Samuel Johnson observes, "When a man knows he is to be hanged in a fortnight, it concentrates his mind wonderfully." As it happens, when he faces death at dawn, unless he gets this right, the level of concentration is even more remarkable, for the prospect of sinking immediately has concentrated all limbs in a frenzy of magnificent movement. Even Captain Cook is now showing signs of concern. The reckoning is that with another 1.5 feet of water the ship will no longer float, and they will have to abandon her. If only they had a physically strong Yorkshireman here, perhaps the son of a day labourer, raised doing physical tasks. Wait a minute. They do. For now Captain Cook himself is removing his jacket, rolling up his sleeves and taking his place on the pump. How desperate is the situation. Even more desperate than needing Captain Cook. It is so desperate that, can you believe it, lads, that is Mr. Joseph Banks himself, now lending a hand. So exhausting is the work that few men can keep hauling on the levers of the pumps for any longer than 15 minutes before, in an endless rotation, they must be relieved by the next man. Everybody on board, from captain to clerk, takes their turn. And yes, friends, the final measure of their desperation is that even the thin-as-a-leaf astronomer, Charles Green, is required to take his turns, no matter that he has biceps like peanuts and legs so skinny they would shame a pigeon. The only exceptions to the rule are Sidney Parkinson and Tupaia, the former extremely ill in his bunk and unable to move, while the latter is even sicker, but is at least attended by the ever-faithful Teato. None rest, none stop, not for a moment, and then a miracle occurs. The water was all out. 4 feet dispelled. How is it possible? Not only that, it was done in much shorter time than was expected. Something is amiss here, and sure enough, upon examination, it was found that she never had half so much water in her as was thought, the carpenter having made a mistake in sounding the pumps. God bless the bloody carpenter, and may he make plenty more mistakes like that, for their collected vigour has the Endeavour free upon the sea. She floats, and she may sail yet. As Cook will record in his log, the man initially sent to read the depth of water was relieved by another, who was ignorant of the manner in which the first man had sounded. So the carpenter, took the depth of water from the outside plank, the difference being 16 or 18 inches, and made it appear that the leak had gained this upon the pumps in a short time. All delight in the joy of the mistake and the thrill of survival. But can they keep going at this pace? Is it possible to continually fight off the water that even now begins to test their pumps anew? That rush of muscle power that comes from desperation pure cannot last forever. The pitiless sea, however, can and will.
This ends CD 13. CD 14.
Soon enough, every man Jack on the ship is both exhausted and ever more relieved to be relieved by the next shift as the pumping goes on, and no man more than Mr. Banks, who is, as he puts it, so unused to labour. He has done the first sustained, heavy physical work of his life, as the ship, very sluggishly, starts moving back towards the coast. But can it go on? Can they keep pumping at this rate and survive long enough to get back to the coast? As the men tire, the pumps fall behind, and this time there is no miraculous mistake. The Endeavour starts to settle ever deeper into the water, increasing the seepage. With every inch of freeboard that disappears as the ship goes lower and slower, the feeling of gloom on the ship also starts to deepen once more. But now, a nervous young man, the 19-year-old midshipman Jonathan Monkhouse, slowly approaches Captain Cook and begs leave to tell him a story. "Very well. At once and in haste. Out with it, man. Sir, I was once aboard a ship that left Virginia and smashed a hole in its hull so large that it let in 4 feet of water in a single hour. But by use of a thing they called fothering, the captain was able to sail that seemingly hopeless ship all the way to London." Cook, like many of the sailors, has heard of the obscure practice of fothering, but like everyone else, with the exception of young Monkhouse, has never seen it done. So, do go on. Young Monkhouse explains. It sounds like a miraculous method, which is useful, as all know that it will take a miracle for the Endeavour to remain afloat. So what do they have to lose? Captain Cook puts young Monkhouse in charge of the operation. Young Monkhouse is overcome with joy and tension. Since that slipshod shooting in Tahiti, he has been all too aware that the warmth of the captain's affection for him could not keep a mouse from freezing. And yet, here is a chance for redemption, if it works. What is more, Monkhouse might prove the salvation of every soul on board the boat. No matter his comparative lack of rank, young Monkhouse is to have total command over all, as the 5 sailors he is given to assist must jump to his instructions. We begin by mixing together a large quantity of oakum, chopped fine with strands of wool, so we have the basic material that might help plug the leak. Oh, and to this we must add sheep dung, or whatever filth we can find. The more fibrous the better. And small stones are also very important, so let's throw these ones we have here into the mix. In his own way, young Monkhouse might do the witches of Macbeth proud, as he mixes his hasty potion. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, fillet of fenny snake in the cauldron boil and bake. Now take a spare sail, spread it out on the deck, and, as loosely as possible, place fist-sized bundles of our mixture on the sail, in rows, so that each bundle is just 3 or 4 inches from the next. As the sailors work, all around are aware just what is at stake, as the ship becomes ever more sluggish and even starts to list. Mr. Banks notes that the worsening situation makes all hands impatient for the trial. "Stand back! Everyone back!" Now a rope is fastened to each corner of the sail, and, with infinite care, the whole thing is lowered over the bow of the ship, with the globs of oakum and wool topmost, before the ropes are drawn back so that the sail will come directly over the damaged part of the hull, still with the ropes holding it tightly to the hull. Wherever the leak is, young Monkhouse explains to Banks, must be a great suction, which will probably catch hold of one or other of these lumps of oakum and wool, and drawing it in either partly or entirely stop up the hole. In the meantime, keep pumping. For his part, Captain Cook takes advantage of a change in the wind direction. It is now pushing them towards land, and as sluggish as she is, begins steering the Endeavour to the west. Or is she so sluggish after all? She seems to be moving faster, lifting a little in the ocean. Yes, she is. It is working. It is working. In about half an hour, as Banks records, to our great surprise the ship was pumped dry, and upon letting the pumps stand, she was found to make very little water. So much beyond our most sanguine expectations had this singular expedient succeeded. Rejoice, 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 for we are saved, at least for the moment, and it is for good reason that young Monkhouse practically skips along the deck, for he is no less than the man of the moment, and very likely the man of the whole voyage. For the actual moment, as darkness falls, Cook has the anchors dropped as the ship approaches close enough to the coast to hear the surf in the far distance. On the morrow they will look for a safe harbour, a place where we might lay her ashore and repair her. Mr. Banks, for one, is stunned at how successful the whole thing is, and how everyone has cooperated to make it happen. During the whole time of this distress, I must say for the credit of our people that I believe every man exerted his utmost for the preservation of the ship, contrary to what I have universally heard to be the behaviour of seamen who have commonly, as soon as a ship is in desperate situation, began to plunder and refuse all command. This was no doubt owing entirely to the cool and steady conduct of the officers, who during the whole time never gave an order which did not show them to be perfectly composed and unmoved by the circumstances, howsoever dreadful they might appear. In fact, with little bothering, the fothering holds not only for the 24 miles back to shore, but for the following 3 days, while Cook looks for a suitable harbour in which to beach his ship, his master and midshipmen ceaselessly searching for that very spot in their smaller boats. In the meantime, Captain Cook still must take extraordinary care, and his time, as they must dodge the endless shoals and outcrops of coral that form a veritable great barrier of reefs between them and the coastline. To get through them in a sluggish ship, all while encountering changing winds and swirling currents, is supremely difficult. And so James Cook proceeds with utmost prudence. Finally, Master Molyneux sends a report back that he has found a suitable spot to bring the ship ashore, a large river mouth, some 5 miles leeward of their current position. The news is manna from heaven for a ship's company keenly aware that, as things are, as Banks chronicles, there is nothing but a lock of wool between us and destruction. Though the weather has turned foul with howling gales, Cook carefully brings his ship closer to the position described, and sure enough finds the river mouth with not only a deep enough entrance to accommodate the Endeavour, but most usefully sandy shores on both sides. It is the perfect place in which they can lay the Endeavour ashore, grounding her at high tide. The next step will be to heave her down, careening, that is, tip her over a tad to get at the damaged hull. Waiting for the seas to calm, for the weather is too tempestuous for the moment to risk trying to enter the river mouth, the botanist spies a fire on the shore at night. There must be natives here. Perhaps, at last, they might make a genuine acquaintance with these most elusive people, instead of just seeing them as flitting figures in the distance. Captain Cook wishes for the same, but for now he must exclusively devote himself to the key task at hand, to effectively strand his ship on the sands like a beached whale at high tide, so it can come to rest, have repair work undertaken at low tide, and then later be floated off at high tide. It is a tricky operation from first to last, and will require all of James Cook's expertise, judgment, and luck. On the 17th of June, a full 3 days after the master had advised of the existence of the river mouth, the weather has sufficiently calmed to make the attempt. Master Molyneux has taken soundings in the river entrance, looking for a deep enough route that the Endeavour will be able to navigate through without grounding on a shoal. It is such an important exercise that Captain Cook himself now goes forth and supervises the laying of buoys, empty water casks anchored by ropes attached to rocks they drop over the side, just as he had in the St. Lawrence River, when he was a master all those years ago. It is a tricky operation, and as it is out of the question to sail the Endeavour into such a narrow space as the river mouth, with no possibility of tacking, and no suitable onshore winds pushing it from behind, they must slowly warp the ship in, a technique which sees them send the longboat forward with a stream anchor which is dropped as far as 600 feet ahead of them. Then, by hauling on the capstan, the ship is pulled forward. Such an exercise in strange waters with disaster swirling all around, including potentially hostile natives secreted in the trees over yonder, would be a nightmare for most naval officers on most ships. But Captain Cook is in his element. This is precisely the kind of thing for which the mighty Whitby Cat was designed, getting through narrow river entrances and on and off the tidal flats and sandbars of the east coast of England, loading and unloading coal. Which is as well, for within 60 minutes of weighing anchor and setting sail at 7 a.m., the Endeavour, with a gravelly and grinding groan, nudges into a sandbar, with many a sailor thrown off his feet and the greyhounds yelping in alarm. 2 hours later, by use of the anchors and the capstan, the men are able to back the ship off the bar, only to shortly thereafter come too close into the opposite shore, where she is grounded again. The process is repeated, and so it goes. At 1 p.m. the ship floated, Cook records in his journal, and we warped her into the harbour and moored her alongside of a steep beach on the south side, got the anchors, cables, and all the houses ashore. Captain Cook's relief is palpable. Neither for the first or last time he is thankful for the kind of ship chosen for this venture, the flat-bottomed girl, the snub-nosed Whitby collier, as any other kind of ship would have foundered on the reef and been impossible to beach in this fashion. It is directly due to the mighty Whitby Cat and all her unfashionable qualities that those on board owed their preservation, and hence we were enabled to prosecute discoveries in those seas so much longer than any ship ever did or could do. Any of the grander ships of regular design, built for beauty too, would very likely already be on the bottom of the ocean right now. But the Whitby Cat had not only been able to withstand the impact of the reef and be pulled off without losing a part of her hull, but had managed to limp to the shore. With the Endeavour now secure, they use what long timber they have in storage to make a stage from ship to shore, effectively a bridge from the deck to the steep bank, so that they can easily lighten the ship further by carrying everything in the hold straight across the bridge to dry land. In the meantime, 2 tents are pitched on shore, one to hold those crew members who have been sick, and the second to hold what is still in the hold, the empty barrels and provisions, the remaining cannon and spare anchors. Among the sick carried ashore is the ill Tupaia, who is now also dismayed by what has happened. In 100 long voyages, he had never hit a reef like the white men have. It stuns him that they have, and he must once again take down a notch or two his estimation of their powers. On Tahiti, they had seemed all-powerful. On the water, they can seem primitive. Every day, yet more ballast and stores are taken ashore, at least providing a good chance to stocktake and air things out, until, after several days, all that is left is a very little ballast in the stern of the ship, while the bow, which is where the coral has pierced the hull, is empty. Patience persists in the Endeavour's endeavours until 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the 21st of June, when the moment they have all been working towards arrives, and they are able to warp her further along the inlet until she is nudging the southern shore of the river. Having rendered the bow of the ship as light as possible, they employ the capstan and windlass, with their cables attached to strong trees on the shore, to heave her forward at high tide, and so leave her high and dry on the sand when the tide falls. 22nd of June 1770. Endeavour River. He sees seashell in the starboard. The tide recedes at 2 a.m., and all remaining water drains from the Endeavour, her bow high on the beach. For the first time at dawn, Captain Cook can stand on the sandy, stony shore right by the forward part of the hull to get a close look at the damage, and did someone just walk over his grave? Or is the shudder that moves through him, followed by the wave of incredulity, simply a natural reaction? As Captain Cook realizes the 1 in 1,000 chance that has saved his ship from complete catastrophe. For there it is right before him. There are holes in the hull on both the starboard and larboard sides, and filling the principal hole, the one that would have sunk her, is something resembling a miracle. A large piece of coral rock was sticking in one hole, and several pieces of the fothering, small stones, etc., had made its way in, and lodged between the timbers, which had stopped the water from forcing its way in great quantities. His blessing and his curse, his peril and his path to salvation right there before him. In Cook's whole naval career, he has never heard of such a thing happening, but it has happened to them, and saved them. Examining it even more closely, Cook realizes what has happened. The coral had pierced through the outer planks like a hot knife through butter, and would have continued to cut her open bar one thing. Providence had also seen the coral penetrate the hull right where one of the hardwood hull timbers that form the skeleton of the ship is positioned. The coral has gone deep enough that it looks to have been hacked with an axe, but it has not broken through. As they had rocked the ship from side to side and up and down to get it off the reef, it must have been touch and go, sink or swim, live or die, as to whether the coral or the hardwood would break first. But in the end the coral had broken off, inside, saving 100 families in England and several from the Americas and assorted European countries from being bereaved. Very well then. It is time for the ship's carpenter, John Satterley, with the aid of his assistants, to get to work. And so they do, starting at 9 a.m. and going hard for the rest of the day, cutting away the broken wood and very carefully starting to shape the planks that they can slot in to replace them, then all of it caulked to seal it off. When the tide goes out later in the day, they are able to examine the midsection of the hull on the starboard side, but mercifully find only minimal damage, so it is decided that no further action is required. After finishing the repair of the starboard side of the bow, the ship is heeled over onto the other side by readjusting the strain on the hawsers linked to strong trees, and pulled back just a couple of feet towards the water for fear of neaping, being stuck on land. The men now begin to work on the larboard bow, as this side too has been damaged by the coral and is dangerously compromised. In the meantime, Captain Cook chronicles, the armourers were busy making bolts, nails, etc. Exploring the area a little on the lookout for fresh and interesting specimens, Joseph Banks comes across empty native huts and burnt-out fires, though it is not easy to determine when anyone was last here. Still, such solid-looking human habitation means there must be a good supply of fresh water nearby, and so it proves when Captain Cook finds plentiful spring water. For a ship's company that has been right on the edge of oblivion, it is good news. Water means life, means they will at least likely survive in the short term, whether the Endeavour sails again or not. With their length of stay uncertain, Cook ensures that supplies of food are distributed according to a strict rule. Whatever refreshment we got that would bear a division, he will proudly note, I caused to be equally divided amongst the whole company, generally by weight. The meanest person in the ship had an equal share with myself, or anyone on board. Thinking of you, James Margaret. It is James Cook's way. He is no better than these men, and demands no special privileges. It is possible, just possible, that Mr. Banks does not take the same view. but the quartermaster and cook answer to the captain, not him. Either way, diminishing ship-stored rations make everyone more than usually interested in finding what food they can while here, and a vigorous plan for hunting and fishing is put in place. Strange and extraordinary creatures abound in these parts. The redoubtable midshipman James Margaret is out hunting when he sees a wild dog resembling a smaller version of a wolf, perfectly, he said, like those he had seen in America. He shot at it, but did not kill it. There are also enormous black bats with reddish-brown fur and a wingspan bigger than a yard. A seaman who had been out on duty on his return declared that he had seen an animal about the size of and much like a 1-gallon keg. It was, says he, as black as the devil, and had wings. Indeed, I took it for the devil, or I might easily have caught it, for it crawled very slowly through the grass. After taking some pains, I found out that the animal he had seen was no other than the large bat. Out on the reef just offshore, there are clams so enormous that, as Banks records, one of them was more than 2 men could eat. Many indeed were larger. The coxswain of the boat, a little man, declared that he saw on the reef a dead shell of one so large that he got into it and it fairly held him. Amazing. The truth of it is that there are things to see in this extraordinary place that are true, that rival the stories Charlie Clerk used to make up about Patagonia. Meantime, others of the ship's company who have been sent to the far shore on a pigeon-hunting expedition have a curious experience. They are just firing at passing birds, gathering what they can and moving deeper and deeper into the bush, when one of the men sees something in a fleeting, fleeing moment. Before him is one of the most extraordinary-looking animals he's ever seen, and quite unlike any he's ever seen. It is, as he will describe it to Mr. Banks and Captain Cook a short time later, an animal as large as a greyhound, of a mouse colour, and very swift. Swift? Yes, it sort of bounded away. It is all so very unworldly. The fellow can't even be quite sure what exactly he had seen. It is intriguing enough, however, that Cook and Banks wish to know more, and the following morning Captain Cook is on his own expedition a little into the bush when he too must take pause. There. Where? There! Its head, coming out of the tall grass. It was just as the sailor had described to him the previous afternoon, and, as Captain Cook will recount, I should have taken it for a wild dog, but for its walking or running, in which it jumped like a hare or a deer. Cook cannot see the bottom of the creature. It is hidden by the grass, but others get a clearer view of this oddity. One sailor says that it has very small legs, and the print of the feet like that of a goat. This is a strange land indeed, with a strange people, a strange and treacherous landscape and seascape, and very strange creatures. One way or another, however, they will hopefully shortly be leaving it, as the carpenters and armourers go on with their work, and slowly but surely a brand new piece of hull takes shape, while the rest of the hull is at least scrubbed down to remove barnacles, seaweed, and the like. For the first time they can start to contemplate the next problem beyond surviving: leaving. Chapter 12. Endeavouring to leave. I likewise sent some of the young gentlemen to take a plan of the harbour, and went myself upon the hill, which is near the south point, to take a view of the sea. At this time it was low water, and I saw what gave me no small uneasiness, which were a number of sandbanks and shoals laying all along the coast. The innermost lay about 3 or 4 miles from the shore, and the outermost extended off to sea, as far as I could see without my glass. Captain James Cook, 30th of June, 1770. Late June, 1770. Concard, the Cocoyimida, the spiritual matters. The Cocoyimida people only build small fires. You burn simply what you need to stay warm, or to cook what you have hunted, but no more than that. On this evening, as they have their evening meal around the fire, they discuss the strange spirit and ghostly men who arrived at Wallambalbiri, the river mouth of their land. The intruders are indeed strange and troubling, for they gorge on the fruits of this land, trample its grasses, disrespect its sacred sites, and take more fish and turtles than they can possibly need. And they don't move on. What is happening? Are these pale-skinned intruders Wangar, spirits of our long-dead ancestors? Or are they Bama people? And if so, are they Yarka, men, or Nantu, women? Their strange garb covers their groins, so the Kukuyimada cannot tell for sure. On the one hand, they have no facial hair. On the other hand, they have no sign of breasts. Only by stripping one down will they get to the bottom, and more of it. But dare they go close? The discussion goes well into the starry night as they keep feeding the fire, just what it needs, and no more. Must we, of the Kukuyimada, ignore their presence, challenge it, or welcome it? For the moment they are not sure, having never faced anything like this before, nor even heard mention of such spirits in their ancestors' stories. For now, the elders caution patience. Let us watch and wait. 30th of June, 1770, New Holland. A great barrier is sighted. It is 20 days since they hit the reef and 9 days since they managed to beach the Endeavour. Cook and Banks, struggling to the top of the hill on this fine morning, barely speak, despite, or perhaps because of, having spent nearly every hour of nearly every day for the last 22 months within 10 yards of each other. It is not that they have little left to say, or actively dislike each other. It is simply that, for the most part, their interactions are on matters of direct import to the expedition. And on this morning the most important thing is to get to the top of this steep hill. As they come upon the peak, it all lies before them. To the western interior of this land they see, with poetical spirit, the vision splendid of a sunburnt country stretching for 100 horizons. It looks forbidding for any people who would try to cross it, but out to sea, to the east, it seems even worse than they feared. A succession of reefs, stretching out as far as the eye can see. It is a great barrier, a reef defending this continent from the open ocean, and it seems a wonder that they were able to make their way through it in the first place. For yes, while it had been one thing to have the Endeavour almost seaworthy once more, it is clearly going to be something else entirely to guide it safely out to the open ocean once more, through the maze of shoals and reefs, some exposed, some hiding just below the surface, waiting to hold them once more. The prospect was indeed melancholy, Banks records, and no prospect of any straight passage out. To return as we came was impossible. The trade wind blew directly in our teeth. Most dangerous, then, our navigation must be among unknown dangers. How soon might we again be reduced to the misfortune we had so lately escaped? Escaped indeed we had not until we were again in an open sea. The walk back down the hill is even more silent, each man alone with his troubled thoughts. 1st of July, 1770, Endeavour River. Eat your peas. As for the men, they are a happy band. Against all odds, they have survived, and are on firm land with plenty of fresh water and fresh food. The ship's boats keep returning laden with dozens of fish, while the fertile land in these parts grows small amounts of a type of edible green foliage that Banks calls West Indian kale, which Cook orders to be prepared, to be boiled among the peas, to make a very good mess, which, together with the fish, is a great refreshment to the people. For his part, Tupaia finds cocoas, a taro plant, the roots of which he personally roasts to serve to the men. The waves low and the tide even lower, on the morning of the 3rd of July, Captain Cook gives orders for the men to heave the Endeavour afloat. and they busy themselves making preparations. They must lash empty casks to the ship's bow, the collective buoyancy hopefully enough to float the Endeavour when the high tide comes in. Alas, the men are not quick enough, and fail to finish before the ocean has reached high water and is beginning to drop once more. They must try again come tomorrow's high tide. So it comes to pass the next day, as all hands apply themselves to trimming her while she floats at even keel. Cook hopes to lay the great ship ashore once more, as the hull could do with an inspection under the larboard main-chains. They warp the ship over to the long sandbank, snaking parallel to the south bank of the river, and beach her once more. The inspection reveals that indeed there is damage to the hull. Nevertheless, Captain Cook records Carpenter John Satterley's view that the impact on seaworthiness is of little consequence, and as I found that it would be difficult, if not impractical, for us to get onto her bottom to repair it, I resolved to spend no more time about it. Yes, good news for all. Some among the ship's gentlemen, however, led by the sniff-snuffing-turned-snivelling surgeon, Monkhouse, resent both Captain Cook's clear deep respect for the view of a mere carpenter and the said carpenter's unseemly swagger because of it. Surgeon Monkhouse's view is supported by Surgeon's mate, William Perry, who also notes that the captain is only interested in those that can heal sick ships, not sick men. Where is the respect for them? Nevertheless, for the moment, Satterley is the sage, and all the medical men can do is work on a cure for their wounded pride. Unhappily for the backs of her sailors, the ship must be floated anew. With grunts and oaths, urged on by the fearsome yells of midshipmen and the grins of their shipmates standing on deck, the Endeavour is pushed by the sailors on shore, as all three ships' boats tug her out with straining rowers and wary officers watching the mighty vessel sitting stubbornly on the sandbank. In the end, it is like the birth of a poddy calf, as, after a terrible strain, everything suddenly comes with a rush, and the Endeavour floats freely once more. Captain Cook watches the successful operation with pleasure, then orders the crew to moor the Endeavour alongside the beach where the stores lie and prepare to bring them aboard to be stowed. The gun, in Tupia's hands, weighs more than its mass. It is a heavy burden, a terrifying power, but one he must get used to. It is the 5th of July, 1770, on the white man's calendar. A rustle, in the undergrowth, somewhere near. Tupia and his gun disappear into the scrub, under the watchful, if a little bemused, eye of Joseph Banks. It has been a fortnight now since the beaching of the Endeavour, and while the Englishman and Tupia are supposed to be busy botanizing, the Tahitian man seems far more concerned with prey, suddenly eager to use the ungainly metal monster in his hands. Tupia stalks through the bush, winding through the harsh native scrub like a silent predator, crawling over rocks, sliding through the gaps in the trees. He creeps over a rise now, searching for, well, not for men, and yet that is precisely what Tupia has found. 2 natives digging in the ground for some kind of roots. On seeing him, they ran away, with great precipitation. 2 natives peacefully collecting bush tucker as Tupia stands above them, gun brandished. There are natives in these parts. Tupia continues apace with his hunting. Again and again he fires. Again and again and again, unseen by him, many sets of eyes in the bushes gaze in wonder. How can this be happening? The Kukuyimada people are mystified. The brown man holds the thunderstick to his shoulder, squints his eyes, and after a puff of smoke emerges from one end, comes the shattering noise, and then sometimes a distant bird will fall from the flock. 7th of July, 1770, Endeavour River. Hooroo? Joseph Banks is transfixed. While on a brief camping trip upriver to explore some of the inland, he and his companions have hauled the craft up onto the banks to explore a little, when they see the most extraordinary thing. It must be the strange animal the others have talked about. There are 4 of them, perched on their back legs with their massive tails, and clearly they are aware they are being watched, that there are strangers in their territory. They lift their heads from eating grass, twitch their ears, shake their heads from side to side, have a little hop, and now they're off, leaping away, nay, leaping away. We observe, much to our surprise, Banks will chronicle, that instead of going upon all 4s, this animal went only upon 2 legs, making vast bounds. It is like nothing Joseph Banks and his companions have ever seen before. They stand staring in awe as these extraordinary animals take effortless, massive jumps, which eat up yards of ground at a time. Eager to bring one down so as to be able to examine it, Banks unleashes his lightning-fast hound, Lady. "Run the beast down!" With a yelp, Lady is on her way. With the 4 bounding animals split up into 2 pairs, the greyhound picks the closest pair and is closing fast, until they hit a patch of thick grass. The hound is immediately slowed, while the bouncing animals bound, a big hop, soaring over the top and far, far away. The running English greyhound outpaced by the bounding New Holland greyhound. No, really. Overhead, a flock of colourful birds affirm it is the funniest thing they've ever seen, laughing till they can laugh no more at the very idea that a visitor to these shores could get the better of one of them. Lady limps back to her master, completely and utterly beaten by the local. Never in all their born days have Mr. Banks or the doctor seen anything like it. Examining the tracks the hopping animals have left behind and pacing it out, Banks finds that they take 7 or 8 feet at each hop. Extraordinary. For now, continuing up the river, the waterway narrows to the point that it is only a brook, and so the men begin to make camp for the evening, when Mr. Banks sees smoke curling upwards in the late afternoon light from a spot not far upriver. The natives are obviously there, and as the men of the Endeavour are yet to see any up close, and are travelling in such a small, unintimidating group, this might be the perfect opportunity to show the natives that they need have no fear. Alas, it is less the visitor's reputation that precedes them than their sound and even smell, and when they arrive, there is little to see beyond the small fire, in an old tree of touchwood, spindly and tinder-dry, some rough kind of shelters, scattered tree branches, and, hauntingly, footprints upon the sand below the high tide mark, which proved they had very lately been there. And they really have. For look here, near the fire, is the evening meal they had perhaps been about to eat, including shells of a kind of clam and roots of a wild yam which had been cooked in it. It is a strange thing to have stumbled upon such an intimate thing, perhaps like they are intruding, and yet there is nothing for it. These are people of such unaccountable timidity, matched only by their skill in invasion, that if they don't want to be seen up close, they won't be. In any case, it is getting dark, and so it is time for the intruders to return to their own camp, where their own evening meal of considerably more refinement is nearly ready, and their beds of plantain leaves and pillows of grass are laid out on the sandbank, ready for the night's slumber. Mr. Banks reminds the men there's no need for more shelter, or any worry about attack. Unlike in New Zealand, here in New Holland, the natives never feel like a threat. 8th of July, 1770. Far north coast New Holland, a land lost in time. The languid air hangs hot and heavy, with the mingled odours of distant smoke and surrounding hibiscus. This bush of New Holland teems with life. Insects buzz and drone, birds caw and cackle. Stunning snakes sun themselves on the river banks, and enormous lizards with long tails take fright at their presence and run up trees. The water is alive, too. Regular flashing flurries of fish dart back and forth beneath the Endeavour's bow, and strange insects whir just above the water's surface, lowering themselves for a sip or a dip, leaving vanishing patterns when they take flight. Everywhere the Englishmen turn in this extraordinary land, They see things they scarce could have imagined. The next morning, Banks and the camping party are heading back down the river when from the mangroves comes crawling a reptilian beast straight from antiquity, a 7-foot-long crocodile with massive jaws and gleaming pointed teeth. Row on, and stroke, and stroke, and stroke. The sailors in the yawl put their whole bodies into every haul on the oar, leaving the gargantuan crocodile in their wake. Returning to the Endeavour, Mr. Banks is informed that while those in the pinnace have not been able to find a navigable route out of the Great Barrier of Reefs by simply dangling a boat hook from their stern, they have managed to catch 3 delicious turtles, weighing 791 pounds in total. It is becoming clear that in terms of the diversity and richness of their diet, they are more blessed here than any other place they have visited. The promise of such plenty of good provisions made our situation appear much less dreadful. Were we obliged to wait here for another season of the year, when the winds might alter, we could do it without fear of wanting provisions. This thought alone put everybody in vast spirits. Come what may, Captain Cook must prepare for the prospect of imminent departure, and orders the seamen to begin bringing the ballast back on board. 9th of July, 1770. Upon the reef. Banks meets his master. "Say what, Master Molyneux?" "I said no, Mr. Banks." And he means it. The sun glares down on the 2 men glaring at each other as they stand on a rocky crop on a coral land far out to sea. In England, Mr. Banks's superior class would crush Master Molyneux like a scurrying cockroach. But right here, right now, it is not so clear. For while Mr. Banks may have an esteemed position on the Endeavour, even there he is in no position to order the master to do anything. And on this reef, in a party under the command of Master Molyneux, who has taken the longboat, towing Banks's small boat to explore one of the reefs just a little offshore, Mr. Banks can't order him to hitch his trousers up, let alone go after yet more turtles. Master Molyneux had reluctantly taken Mr. Banks along, but he will be damned if he's going to take orders from him, particularly when they already have more than enough turtles. For his part, Joseph Banks is deeply frustrated. For despite his will to command and his anger that he can't, he has no recourse. He is reduced to sitting there, impotent, and in a red rage, until, after a brief time examining the large cockles and gathering shells and the like, he returns to the Endeavour in his small boat, leaving Master Molyneux and his men out there. A furious Joseph Banks finds Captain Cook and gives him a very bad account of our turtle catchers. It is against nature that he should have no such power. At dawn the next day, after Captain Cook sends Lieutenant Gore forth to order the return of Master Molyneux and his men, the ship's company note in the near distance, on the sandy spit on the north point of the harbour, 4 natives in canoes with outriggers, using their spears to fish. "Captain Cook, perhaps this is our opportunity to make contact?" But the captain has a better tactic. It is one he has learnt here in New Holland. "Leave them alone," he orders the men, who are eager to row over and attempt a contact, without seeming to take any notice of them. So, instead of pursuing the natives and perpetually being frustrated by their powers of evasion, the white men are ignoring them. And sure enough, just 15 minutes later, it is working. It is working. The natives are suddenly interested, and 2 of them are now approaching. As those on deck watch closely, still trying not to seem too interested, the 2 natives in their simple bark canoe, which barely sits above the water, come close enough to the towering Endeavour that the men are able to throw a couple of shiny baubles down, which clearly please the 2 natives well enough that they soon go away, to soon return, with the other 2 men in the second canoe, this time coming closer, and what now? They have stopped, just the distance of a long musket shot away, and in their incomprehensible language are talking very loudly. Joseph Banks and many of his entourage, together with some of the sailors, call back to them and make signs that they should come closer. "Come closer!" And they do. Little by little, the natives paddle forward, till they are right alongside, in the shadow of the Endeavour. But careful. Still they brandish their spears, as if, Mr. Banks notes, to show us that if we used them ill, they had weapons and would return our attack. Yes, yes, yes. Some gifts, perhaps. In short order, the men of the Endeavour are handing down to the natives everything from cloth to nails to pieces of paper and beads, none of which seem to interest them remotely. Yes, they dutifully put them in their canoe, but there is barely a flicker of interest from them until by accident a small fish, recently caught, is thrown down to them, whereupon, as Joseph Banks records, they expressed the greatest joy imaginable, and instantly putting off from the ship, made signs that they would bring over their comrades. All for a small fish, something they already appear to have in abundance. This is indeed a strange people. But sure enough, the two soon return with their companions, although all have their spears with them and their throwing sticks. The Englishmen and the natives both make their way to the nearest shore to parley, meaning it is time for Tupaia, who has recovered just enough, now they are eating fresh food, to work his magic. As ever, his dark skin alone has some power to soothe, although the natives do begin by raising their spears to him and make as if they might throw them. He is able to use his sign language to such effect that they lay down their arms and come to sit next to the Tahitian holy man. It is safe. The native men trust him. Not so the women, who stay on the far shore and are notable for the feathers stuck on the crown of their heads and their lack of any clothing whatsoever. "They do not so much as cover their privates," records the captain a tad disapprovingly, though "they wear as ornaments necklaces made of shells and bracelets." Later, Cook would elaborate for the Admiralty that each of the women they see are naked as ever she was born. "Even those parts which I always before now thought nature would have taught a woman to conceal were uncovered." Quite. And even after Captain Cook lands with some of his officers and marines, still the natives remain calm and receive presents, which they took and soon became very easy, only jealous if anyone attempted to go between them and their arms. For the first time, Cook is able to get a close look at them. While one of the natives appears to be in his 30s or thereabouts, the other three can't be older than their late teens. They are lithe, athletic men, none of them taller than 5'6", and all of them entirely naked, with skins the colour of wood soot, and this seemed to be their natural colour. Their hair was black, lank, and cropped short, and neither woolly nor frizzled. And look closer now at their physiques. "Their bones were so small," Sidney Parkinson notes, "that I could more than span their ankles. And their arms, too, above the elbow joint." Like the Tahitians and the New Zealanders, they have all gone through some kind of ritual on their way to adulthood, which has left its peculiar mark. On their breasts and hips were corresponding marks like ridges or seams raised above the rest of the flesh, which looked like the cicatrices of ill-healed wounds. As it happens, the Kuku-Yimada call their territory Kankad, from the word kankar, from the very distinctive kind of crystal quartz found in the area, perfect for forming the sharp edges they need to cut their chest skin for initiation ceremonies. And look closer still. Some had a small hair rope about their loins, and one about an arm made of human hair. They had also a bag that hung by their necks, which they carried shellfish in. Some of them had necklaces made of oval pieces of bright shells, which lay imbricated over one another and linked together by 2 strings. To Captain Cook's surprise, none of them appears to be missing their front teeth, a feature previously noted by William Dampier in his meetings with the natives on the western side of the country. They do appear to have some kind of red paint daubed over parts of their bodies, while one of them has his upper lip and breast painted with streaks of white, which he called carbanda. Their features were far from being disagreeable. Their voices were soft and tunable, and they could easily repeat any word after us, but neither us nor Tupaia could understand one word they said. After which, as Captain Cook recounts, most of us went to them, made them again some presents, and stayed by them until dinner time approached. No matter, there has been such warmth in the exchanges that Captain Cook, reluctant to break off their seeming entente, even asks if the natives would perhaps like to join them for a meal upon the ship. But this they declined, Captain Cook records, and as soon as we left them, they went away in their canoe. Still, it is a start, a real start. For the first time, Captain Cook feels they have had a genuine exchange with the natives, and though it is hardly a diplomatic success, it is at least more than spying fleeting, flitting figures and flashing white souls in the distance, no sooner seen than they disappear. 11th of July, 1770. Endeavour River. Fishing with compliments. Extraordinary. The next sparkly winter morning as the men move about the ship, storing barrels of water in the hold, airing the bread on the foredeck, Joseph Banks is on the quarterdeck, scanning the surrounds, when 4 natives appear as if from nowhere. 3 of them had come the day before, but the other is a stranger, and in the nose of the stranger is a bone as thick as a sailor's finger. Banks gets a welcome close look at them, noting how, in fact, they all had the septum or inner part of the nose bored through with a very large hole, in which one of them had stuck the bone of a bird, 5 or 6 inches long, an ornament no doubt, though to us it appeared rather an uncouth one. Oddly, Cook notes, all of the women also have holes in their ears, but no ornaments hanging from them. The natives have come today with a specific purpose, to give the white men a fish, in return for the fish that they were so pleased to receive the day before. They do not wish to be beholden to anyone, and every kindness must be reciprocated. Their stay was but short, Joseph Banks records. For some of our gentlemen being rather too curious in examining their canoe, they went directly to it, and pushing it off, went away without saying a word. There is an innate dignity about these people that Mr. Banks had not previously understood, but is now slowly recognizing. In the distance now he can see the ship's yawl, returning after its visit to the reef to hunt turtle. They have achieved a good haul, 3 more of them. The next day the 3 natives are back with 3 companions, all of whom are formally introduced by name, one of which was Yapariko. As they eat some of the fish that has been prepared for them, the rest of the fish they give to one of the greyhounds, as these big dogs fascinate them. Joseph Banks, along with an enthusiastic Sidney Parkinson, does his best to learn some of their language, and begins to make a list of native words. They use the method they had perfected in Tahiti, pointing to various things and having the natives say their word for it. After all, the President of the Royal Society, James Douglas, the 14th Earl of Morton, had specifically told the captain and gentlemen not only to exercise the utmost patience and forbearance when dealing with the local people, exhorting the voyage leaders to remind the crew of this same moral duty at every opportunity, but, in the event that relations are established, he asked them to form a vocabulary of the names given by the natives to the several things and places which come under the inspection of the gentleman. And here is their first opportunity in New Holland to do exactly that. Typically, Banks does not just trust his own ear or his interlocutor, but asks Mr. Parkinson and a couple of other men to ask different natives about the same objects to make sure he has it absolutely right. Bit by bit, a list of words in the local language is built up. Wagiji, the head. Minang, fire. Milka, the ears. Bonju, the nose. Unta, the tongue. Wala, the beard. Nalan, the sun. Tapul, bone in nose. Oh, there is one thing in particular, something that Mr. Banks can't point at, but he can show the natives the sketch by Mr. Parkinson, the curious hopping creature. Gangaru, replies the native they ask. Kangaroo is carefully recorded. Their language was totally different from that of the islanders, Banks notes. It sounded more like English in its degree of harshness, though it could not be called harsh neither. They almost continually made use of the chirkau, which we conceived to be a term of admiration, as they still used it whenever they saw anything new. Also, chir-tut-tut-tut-tut-tut, which probably has the same signification. So too do the people of this part of New Holland often add an thus tut-tut-r, tut-tut-r, which seemed to register astonishment, while they often whistled when they were surprised. Among the sailors there is an English version of chir-tut-tut-tut-tut-tut. After the sexual delights of Tahiti, and to a lesser extent New Zealand, despite the tut-tuts of their own captain, there had been some hope that New Holland might provide the same. But what happens now is really the first time they have seen a young maiden in all her glory, and there is not the slightest possibility of taking it further. Not only is she accompanied by 2 native men, but she has not the slightest aspect of come hither about her. Whatever her charms, they will not be for the white man's enjoyment. Joseph Banks is disappointed, but too distracted to mull, for the most extraordinary thing unfolds before his eyes. Taking one stick, about 8 inches long, one of the natives sharpens it at one end with a sharp rock, and then places the stick between his hands with the sharp end sitting in a small bed of dry grass that sits atop a piece of soft wood placed on the ground below. By moving his hands back and forth, he makes the stick twist and spin both ways, back and forth, the sharp end boring into the soft wood below. Twisting, 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 onwards he goes, as if warming his hands on a very cold winter's day in the Highlands of Scotland, rather than on this sunny day in the northern reaches of New Holland. Bemused, Banks continues watching closely when it happens. From below the pointed end of the stick, sparks suddenly start to fly spasmodically, momentarily, twist, 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 and more sparks begin to fly, and now the little bed of dry grass catches alight. A solid flame is soon flaring, which in turn begins to devour the soft piece of wood below. 2 minutes, a fire from nothing. But now look, for one native with a great sense of fun runs along the beach, to their eyes carrying nothing, and yet, grinning, the fellow runs back and forth, and has no sooner bent down to a pile of wood than it starts to spiral smoke, and then burst into flames. Fire magic. The white men whoop their appreciation, even as they stare in amused disbelief. It is as if hands can shoot flame. So popular is the trick that it is repeated again and again for the pleasure of the laughing English and beaming natives. Beat that, you white men. How is it done? The scientific side of Joseph Banks insists on finding out. Firstly, it relies, he discovers, on the infinite readiness with which every kind of rubbish, sticks, withered leaves, or dry grass, already almost dried to tinder by the heat of the sun and dryness of the season, would take fire. So dry, just a spark will see each clump burst into flame. But how to provide that spark? It seems that he does it by carrying in his fist a tight ball of smouldering grass that only needs air to be ablaze, and he then breaks off bits of it as he runs, expertly placing each blazing fraction on the part of the clump most likely to ignite. In this manner, proceeding as long as he thought proper. Mr. Banks also notes how fire is used by the natives to keep their hair, facial and otherwise, in trim. That they had no sharp instruments among them, we ventured to guess from the circumstance of an old man who came to us one day with a beard rather larger than his fellows. The next day he came again, His beard was then almost cropped close to his chin, and upon examination we found the ends of the hairs all burned, so that he had certainly singed it off. 14th of July, 1770. Endeavour River, Lieutenant Gore on the hop. Hunting for meat in these parts, shooting the animals and birds, has not been easy for the white men. Clearly, it is no problem for the natives, as they have methods all their own. For one, Joseph Banks finally understands the reason for the notches they had seen cut out of the trees at Botany Bay, notches which they had everywhere cut in the bark of large trees, which certainly served to make climbing more easy to them, might be intended for the ascending of these trees, in order either to watch for any animal who unwarily passing under them they might pierce with their spears, or for the taking of birds, who at night might roost in them. Those natives also have a natural way of moving through the bush, as if they are of the bush. Lieutenant Gore is not of the New Holland bush. He is originally from Virginia, before moving to New York, and he is on the hunt when he sees it. Up ahead, at a distance of about 70 yards, it's a kangaroo that has, miraculously, not heard him or smelled him. Time is of the essence. Lieutenant Gore brings his musket to bear. He is not proud, particularly, to have been the first man to shoot a Tahitian and the first man to shoot a New Zealander, but by God he just knows he is born to be the first man to shoot a kangaroo. He pulls the trigger. The blast sends flocks of cockatoos as far as a mile away, flapping skyward, screeching their alarm. But Lieutenant Gore has the satisfaction of seeing the kangaroo fall. For once, just for once, Mr. Gore has shot something that will please his captain. Bending over the creature, he sees it twitching, its lifeblood flowing from the wound in its side. But it is soon still, and a couple of Lieutenant Gore's men are able to sling it from a stiff pole and carry it back to the Endeavour, where even the carpenters, still busily working on the hull, take momentary pause to get a good look at it. Indeed, it is like nothing they have ever seen, though this one is smaller than many of the others that have been spotted. Properly gutted, to aid in its preservation, Mr. Banks and his men find it weighs no more than 28 pounds. Even Captain Cook is so fascinated he takes up the role of naturalist, and begins some detailed notes on its form. It was hare-lipped, and the head and ears were most like a hare's of any animal I know. The tail was nearly as long as the body, thick next to the rump, and tapering towards the end. The forelegs were 8 inches long, and the hind 22. It bears no sort of resemblance to any European animal I ever saw. So, in the end, aside from being faster than a greyhound, the kangaroo looks nothing like a greyhound either. Sidney Parkinson couldn't agree more, and with pencil in hand tries to capture it. It is not easy. When drawing a man or a dog or a bird, their form simply pours from his pencil, as he is more than familiar with the basic contours, and must only alter the shapes so as to properly capture the beak or the nose, the chin, the lines of the forehead, etc. But here, he must first struggle to get even the basic contours right, before even getting to the detail. Yes, he notes, it has a head like a fawn's, lips and ears, which it throws back like a hare's. The tail, which is carried like a greyhound's, was almost as long as the body, and tapered gradually to the end. The chief bulk of this animal is behind, the belly being largest and the back rising towards the posteriors. The whole body is covered with short ash-coloured hair. All up, Joseph Banks is more than pleased with Lieutenant Gore's feat in bringing down and then bringing back the animal, and even more pleased the next day when, dressed for our dinners, it proved excellent meat. By now, as hunting expeditions continue to replenish their food supplies, all are feeling more confident about the immediate future and relieved that their days of being on a starvation diet may be over. This feeling grows even more on this evening when the yawl brings, to everyone's delight, another 4 turtles, each one between 200 and 300 pounds. So we may now be said to swim in plenty. And it is not just the quantity, but the quality. Our turtles, Banks notes, are certainly far preferable to any I have ate in England, where, slaughtered in captivity after being fed on unnatural food, they do not give so delicious a flavour as it is in their wild state. So delicious are the turtles, and likely so good for the men's health, that Captain Cook decides to take some with them, alive, in tubs filled with water, so they can be eaten at the crew's leisure. Among the Kukuyimada people there is growing dismay and unrest. Today these strange white visitors have taken 3 more enormous mamingu, female green turtles, aboard their enormous vessel. Why? How can this be? And how many of such turtles can be left for them? In a community where the only things that are captured and killed are those needed to fulfill immediate needs, there is alarm and outrage at such a rapid depletion of such a valuable resource. How long will these strange visitors stay? 17th of July, 1770. Endeavour River. No contact, Sir Joseph. Even with a skiff, a boat with which he had little previous experience, Tupaia is able to master it quickly and move upon the water with such fluidity that he is a pleasure to watch. On this occasion, he rows back to the Endeavour from the shore, and once back on deck reports to Captain Cook that he had met with 3 natives who had been friendly and given him some longish roots to eat. Cook, Banks, and Solander are so eager to meet the natives that Tupaia agrees to accompany them back to the shore, where they meet 4 natives who happily receive beads offered as gifts before taking their leave. "We attempted to follow them," Banks chronicles, "hoping that they would lead us to their fellows, where we might have an opportunity of seeing their women. They, however, by signs made us understand that they did not desire our company." What is to be done about these ghostly men on the shores of Kukuyimada country? They behave with such greed, with no thought for the natural world around them. They also don't appear to be moving on any time soon. Something must be done. Would it not be wise to go aboard the hulking canoe themselves? Surely our turtles are somewhere aboard, and if not, then we can communicate with these men and find out more. But in order to be invited aboard, we must play along with their customs. We shall accept their trinkets, trades, and even eat with them. We will not go unarmed, though we cannot afford to show any menace or have them think we mean harm. Once we have their trust, we will climb aboard the great canoe, and from there we will learn the truth of what happened to the turtles. 18th of July, 1770. The natives invade British territory. What has gotten into them? In Banks's eyes, the natives appear to have lost all fear of us and became quite familiar, coming out to the ship as casually as if they were heading out fishing. One of them agrees to demonstrate his prowess with a spear, which is about 8 feet long. It flew with a degree of swiftness and steadiness that really surprised me, Banks notes, never being above 4 feet from the ground, and stuck deep in at a distance of 50 paces. As demonstrations go, even Joseph Banks is impressed, and for the first time in New Holland, even a little intimidated. How long would he and the rest of the ship's company last in the face of a mass attack by the natives? From the look of this demonstration, not long. It seems to underline the point of a sharpened spear that the reason none of them have yet lost their lives to the natives in their whole time in New Holland is because the natives have chosen not to kill them, rather than lacking the capacity to do so. It comes as a shock, and no one is more shaken than Mr. Banks, who had concluded that the locals posed no threat, only to find them fully possessed of dangerous weaponry of their own making and more than proficient in the art of battle. Either way, today is a happy day, and some of the natives accept the invitation to come on board the Endeavour. Surely, this time, they will be wide-eyed and seriously impressed with the grandeur of the vessel on which they are privileged to set foot. Surely, as men who are used to canoes, they will be like a man from a small thatched cottage, setting foot in a cathedral for the first time, as they gaze at the towering masts high above, at the shimmering furled sails. Actually, no. Somehow the natives could not be less interested in the ship itself, but they are interested in the caged birds they see on deck, including Tupaya's lorikeet. Chat-tut-tut-tut-tut-tut. Yes, new. But that is not their gist. They are in fact appalled, and begin animatedly discussing the lorikeet, when one of them darts forward and tries to wrench apart the thick strands of wire that form the bars of the cage, before, as birds squawk and the crew shout, he is fallen upon even as other natives cry out and try to do the same. The birds must be freed to fly, and so must the turtles to swim and roam. It takes some time, but the ruckus does eventually die down, even if the birds remain in their cages, and more peaceful, curious interactions ensue. Now, more confident that the natives will not make trouble, Captain Cook turns his attention to that which truly concerns him, getting away from this place, hopefully within just a few days, and with that in mind, even while the natives are still on board, he orders Master Molyneux to take some men and the pinnace out to the northward to seek out a channel among the shoals.
This ends CD 14. CD 15.
The captain and Mr. Banks also head north, crossing to the opposite side of the river, and make slightly inland, walking some 6 miles up to the peak of another hill, and look northward, their intended direction, if they can find a navigable route, to see what obstacles lie between the Endeavour and the open sea. As before, the Great Barrier of Reefs, as impossibly beautiful and colourful and positively magical as it is, provides a melancholy prospect of the difficulties we are to encounter, for in whatever direction we looked, it was covered with shoals as far as the eye could see. The two trudge back to the ship in near silence, arriving to find several more natives on board. As it turns out, the attention of these natives is no longer on the caged birds, nor even the fact that one of the more sullen of the white men seems to be missing most of both of his ears. That must be some strange white tribal ritual. No, they are mesmerized by something else entirely. They have found the turtles, clambering about on the wooden deck. Perhaps it is impressive to have caught so many, but why do the white men need that many? Is there no end to their greed? The natives soon leave, still concerned. 19th of July, 1770, Endeavour River, fire at will. From high on the deck, Joseph Banks spies something on the beach, something curious. Several natives come out of the bush, bringing with them a larger quantity of spears than they had ever done before. The natives' weapons are carefully laid up in a tree, leaving a man and a boy to take care of them, while 10 native men drag their bark canoes to the water's edge, hop in, and paddle swiftly to the English ship. Captain Cook joins Banks at the gunwale and watches as the natives approach. He can see 6 or 7 native women standing in the distance on the shore too, watching. The English have never seen such a large grouping before. Why? Something is up. The natives are welcomed on board, but it is clear by their faces they are no longer in a mood to be welcomed. The sole reason for their visit is soon made clear. The turtles. They want the turtles back, now. The natives can see the dozen turtles lolling about the deck of the white men's ship. They also know the ship is intending to leave, but it will not leave with their turtles. They first, by signs, asked for 1, records Mr. Banks. No, replies Captain Cook. The man who has been told no shows what can only be great marks of resentment. He stamps his foot and shoves Joseph Banks out of his path with a countenance full of disdain, and asks another sailor for the turtles, but again they are told no. At this point things become perilously close to getting out of hand, as 2 of the natives become angered at the refusal, and the captain barks commands for them to be hauled down the gangway and off the ship. The other natives, now getting angered themselves, grew a little troublesome, and were for throwing everything overboard they could lay their hands upon. James Cook tries to pacify the natives by offering them some English bread, which they rejected with scorn, as I believe they would have done anything else excepting turtle. Time after time the natives attempted to grab and rescue the turtles, their turtles, only to be thwarted every time by the Englishmen. Finally it becomes clear to them that they will not succeed in this venture, at least not right now, and with a grunted command from the oldest of the men, suddenly they all in an instant leapt into their canoe and went ashore. They are deeply affronted. While there is a great culture of give and take between tribes, whereby a tribe, blessed with a sudden bounty of food, will give to a tribe without that bounty, it is very much a reciprocal arrangement. All that the white men have done so far is take, and these turtles are not theirs to take. The key food of the Kuku-Yimata people, it is outrageous for these strange men to just come in, help themselves, and take away their turtles. The mamingu, female green turtles, are a sacred part of this world, a key food source that must only be captured and killed in season with great care, so they will continue to collectively thrive and feed the clan. Everyone knows that. Taking so many is against nature and an offence to the law of this land. And so they go. In the yawl, as it happens, Captain Cook and Mr. Banks are not far behind them, as Banks is desirous of doing one last round of plant gathering, while Cook, in turn, wishes to confirm that none of the Endeavour's equipment has been left on shore. As the two Englishmen are about to land, they are pleased to see many of the sailors doing no less than taking in the washing, gathering the linen that has just been washed in the river and dried on tree branches, as well as striking the tents, all in preparation for their departure. It is a peaceful scene, with no hint of trouble, until just a few minutes after they land, suddenly a group of armed natives approach and press around the fire where some of the men have a kettle boiling, ready to ply the seams of the Endeavour with boiling pitch. What on earth are they doing? It all happens so quickly there's barely time to comprehend it. It is the fire magic. But this time it is being used as a weapon against them. A native's hands brush near the earth, and fire springs up, each quick touch quickly sparking terror as well as flame. The native's palm is cupped, the flame concealed, and kept alive by his stoic refusal to feel its heat, and though the Englishmen have seen this trick before, only now do they see the danger of the magic. It is no parlour trick, it is a death trap. For now the natives run, spreading fire and panic in a succession of terrifying instants. Too late, Captain Cook and Mr. Banks realise that the tall grass that surrounds them is a deadly potential weapon, and watch in stupefied horror as one running native began to set fire to the grass, to windward of the few things we had left ashore, with surprising dexterity and quickness. The grass, which was 4 or 5 feet high, and was as dry as stubble, burnt with vast fury. Most shocking is the speed with which the fire takes hold. It has gone from nothing to leaping flames in just seconds, and the resulting billowing smoke and sense of all-engulfing inferno is overwhelming. The white men had had no idea of just how quickly the grass and bush of New Holland could burn. As Cook notes, it was so swift that, before we well knew what he was going on about, he made a larger circuit around about us, and set fire to the grass in his way, and in an instant the whole place was in flames. He's momentarily transported back to that late night on the St. Lawrence River, when he had awoken to see the flaming French fleet drifting towards him. In every direction bar the sea there is a raging fire, meaning the newly arrived white men must do precisely what the natives want: leave, get on their vessels, and go. While nearly all eyes look to Captain Cook for what to do, Joseph Banks, as is ever his wont, moves on his own account, snapping orders at 4 sailors. Even though he has no formal authority over them, he is soon on his way back to the Endeavour at all speed to get armed reinforcements. On the other side of those flames they have men, not to mention clothes, linen, fishing nets, the forge. All of them must be rescued. None can be left to the natives, and least of all the men. But there is a more important matter still. First and foremost, we must save the botanist's tent, placed there for the benefit of Tupaia. The men row with all their might as Banks's fury grows. The men, still standing on shore in the closing horseshoe of flames, the captain at their head, hear the sudden squeal of a panicked piglet which had been let off the ship to graze. It is caught on the other side of the flames, which soon burn the piglet to death as it tries to run through. Once there is the smallest break in the inferno, Captain Cook makes a mad dash to get through the raging wall and over to his men further down the beach, who are washing linen, and are as yet not surrounded by fire. A man of action, as he had been at St. Lawrence, and yet, even as he runs towards them, making heavy weather of it as his black boots sink into the sand, he can see that natives are unleashing precisely the same fire magic around these men. Like fire demons, these manic magicians run along, belching flame with every thrust of their hands. The flames are spreading around his men, just as they had back near the landing spot. With an anger that rises with equal ferocity to the still rising flames, Captain Cook roars for the natives to stop, his gestures acting as exclamation marks for his words. His meaning is clear, but no threats or signs would make them desist. In desperation, thus, Cook decides he must fire a gun at their new friends, who are friendly no more. But the captain has no gun on his person. Running back to where Mr. Banks and his reinforcements in the yawl have landed and are dragging Banks's tent to safety, the captain grabs a loaded musket from the botanist. Seeing how desperate the situation is, Mr. Banks takes another musket and joins Cook as they both now run along the shore, the civilian and the naval commander yelling in unison for the sailors to run back to the pinnace and for the natives to stop trying to burn them alive. Still the natives persist, and so Captain Cook takes his desperate action. Taking up his already primed musket, he drops to one knee and takes aim at the leading native with fire in his hand, before pulling the trigger. Yes, the small puff of smoke that the musket emits is as nothing to the billowing smoke from the fires, but it is enough. For at this point, as Banks notes, the captain's target dropped his fire and ran nimbly to his comrades, who all ran off pretty fast. Cook himself pursues the fleeing man, noting drops of blood on the ground from the wounded man. Captain Cook again loads his musket and fires into the mangroves the natives have run into, to make the point, as the approving Banks notes, that they were not yet out of our reach. It works. They ran on, quickening their pace on hearing the ball, and we soon lost sight of them. Captain Cook and Mr. Banks return to their landing spot, where Cook is pleased to see the people who were ashore had got the fire under control. But now, in the near distance, raised native voices. Over in the mangroves, where some of the sailors had been doing washing. Anxious that more trouble is afoot, Cook grabs a party of 4 men, along with Banks, and starts running towards the voices. There they are. It is a dozen native warriors, each carrying 4 spears. And despite the fact that James Cook and his men have muskets and brandish them, the warriors do not draw back. Nor do they make an aggressive move, for now all is deadly quiet. Maybe a little too quiet. Birds have taken wing, and the air is so still that the lazy wisps of smoke trailing through the branches barely disperse. All is uncertain. If a full-pitched battle breaks out, each side can do major damage, but it is just not clear if that is the intent. What is happening? No one is sure, and yet now the natives have turned and are beginning to walk away, almost as if on a leisurely stroll. Cook and Banks watch as the natives go, noticing that a number of them have dropped their spears. Thinking it better to be on the safe side, the captain and his men follow the natives, seizing 6 of the spears as they go. Hostages. This terrifies the natives, who look over their shoulders to see it happen, and they immediately take flight. Wary, Captain Cook and Mr. Banks follow the retreating warriors for near a mile, Then, meeting with some rocks from whence we might observe their motions, we sat down, and they did so too, about 100 yards from us. But now what? One of the natives stands and is coming towards them, and he has something in his hand. A spear? A spear. Hands fly to muskets. It very well might be an attack, but wait. They look closer, as the figure tentatively comes closer still. It is a little old man, as Joseph Banks describes him, and what he is carrying is a deliberately broken spear, its once dangerous spearhead now lying at a limp right angle to the main shaft. Several times he stops, but encouraged by the white men beckoning him forward, he always starts approaching again, until he stands before them holding his broken spear. This man, a deeply respected tribal elder by the name of Namoyaparaku, speaks to them. "Natan kate dawun ma natihu," he says. "We come to make friends." But of course none of the Endeavour men can understand a word. Nevertheless, it is clear that his gesture of having broken his spear is a gesture of peace. The man goes on to explain in his curious sign language what he wants. He uses a curious mannerism that includes, as described by Joseph Banks, drawing moisture from under his armpits and blowing the sweat on his hands into the air. Unknown to the white men, he is performing a ritual known as Nala Damal, my sweat from me sent to you, a call for calm. For Captain Cook and the ship's company have been extremely fortunate to land in a sacred part of the Kukuyimata's Bapor land, the place of the Waimbur clan, a place of peace, where marriage and initiation ceremonies are performed. Women come to give birth, celebrations are held, and conflicts are resolved. A place where it is strictly forbidden for warring tribes and clans to spill blood. The little old man is making a gesture of peace, and, in so doing, is asking the white men to respect the law and the law of this sacred place. As a Kukuyimata elder of the clans, it is the duty of Namoyaparaku to try to stop further desecration at Waimbur. And, having identified Captain Cook as the elder of this intruding clan, he is asking him to stop further desecration of the area by spilling blood in a conflict. Clearly, the reaction he receives from the white men now, the smiles, their warmth, and, perhaps most importantly, the fact that he has been unmolested, is a clear sign that the white men too want peace. For now, he turns and calls to the other natives to come forward, clearly telling them to leave their spears. In the soft sunlight, throwing dappled shadows on their forms, they are seen to lay their spears beside a tree, before approaching and joining the little old man. The native men and white men stand gazing at each other. What now? "We now returned the spears we had taken from them," Cook will recount, "which reconciled everything." Yes, reconciliation in our time. Relations so improved that the natives put forth an earnest request. "We have 3 men with us who want to see the ship." They want to see the ship? So the fire battle is over? Oh yes, they explain. The man who was shot at is gone. Very well then, bring them forward. Some words are shouted in their curiously fluid language, and within a minute 3 natives emerge from the bushes, and are given such trinkets as Mr. Banks and Lieutenant Gore have with them, whereupon the newcomers are escorted to the ship. The mood is friendly, with the natives communicating through sign language that they would no longer set fire to the grass, and the Englishmen in turn distributing musket balls among them, and through their own sign language trying to explain a little how they work. And here is the Endeavour, a mighty structure right by the shore, towering over Banks, Gore, and their guests. Would the 3 natives like to come aboard? No, and nothing will convince them to try it. They don't quite know what it is, but they know they don't like it. Very well then, Mr. Banks and Lieutenant Gore are quite content to leave them to their contemplations. They stayed about 2 hours and then departed. The Cookayamata people approached the English one last time. "They all came along with us abreast of the ship," Captain Cook notes, "where they stayed a short time, and then went away." Yes, very strange. But the Endeavour men have grown used to such strangeness. You never quite know what the natives will do next. They don't react like white men. They seem to know the white men are soon to depart, but there is no sense of ceremony about it, no goodbye, and now what? This is no ordinary fire. No beach brush lit by the fire magic, or just a few trees set alight. Oh no, this is much grander than that, awesome in its beauty and its terror. For the natives have, as Captain Cook records, set the woods on fire. The massive conflagration rises and roars with dangerous beauty, about 1.5 miles or 2 miles from us. Mesmerizing and terrifying, it is an inferno reaching into the night sky. Now the wind shifts, and the smoke all but engulfs them as the ship's company, with stinging eyes, start coughing, even as they hold whatever fabric they can to their mouth and nose to help with breathing. Even through the swirling smoke, however, they can still clearly see the inferno in the distance. It is clearly no accident, but is it a tribute or a warning? Have they friends on shore, or an enemy revealed? Captain Cook broods on the tactical meaning as Banks absorbs the aesthetics. "All the hills about us, for many miles, were on fire," Banks records, "and at night made the most beautiful appearance imaginable." It is unnerving, and they can't help but wonder if the fires are the prelude to an attack of some kind, despite the broken spear of the previous day. Men stay on keen watch through the night, with their muskets loaded and primed, but no attack eventuates. The following morning, Captain Cook is at least feeling confident enough to send men ashore to make contact with the natives, but none are to be found in or around the still smouldering bush. Evening, 19th of July, 1770, Endeavour River. Ship sails, by the seashore. It is time to start looking to the sea once more, preparing to face new dangers of finding open passage to the ocean free. The remaining stores are taken aboard the ship, which is rebirthed, and Cook gives the order to let her swing with the tide. And yet, even though the Endeavour is now repaired, their water barrels filled, the cook's storeroom full of freshly slaughtered meat and fish, and live turtles tied up on the deck ready to slaughter, it is not a simple matter of just setting to sea. For, sure enough, in the night the master returned with the pinnace and reported that there was no safe passage for the ship to the northward at low water. Very well then. At sunup, it is none other than James Cook himself, the master of masters, the seer of sandbars, who takes some men to take his own soundings of those sandbars, and finds that, sure enough, it is exactly as Master Molyneux reported. To windward was impossible. To leeward was a labyrinth of shoals. It will take more than a few days to be fully ready in any case. They now need to make further repairs to the ship's hull. Ironically, it is discovered the Endeavour has actually suffered a little damage while being on shore being repaired. Without a cushion of water, wood warps and cracks swiftly in this harsh New Holland sun. A new wait begins. 23rd of July, 1770, Endeavour River. Gathering greenery, unexpected scenery. It all happens so quickly. One moment the young sailor that Captain Cook has sent into the country to gather edible greens is just walking along, and the next he has stumbled upon 4 natives in long grass having a sumptuous meal of roast cockatoo and kangaroo, the uneaten portions of which are hanging from the tree by their side. He is one with no weaponry bar a small knife. They are 4 with spears. To run would be to invite acquaintance with those spears, and so, with no little presence of mind, he simply sits with them. Pleased to meet you. And they are clearly pleased to meet him. Still nervous, the young man offers the natives his knife as a gift. They examine it closely, passing it between them, before they hand it back. What they really want to examine is him, or her, for they remain unsure, and now is finally their moment to find out. Taking the young sailor's mungal hand in theirs, they look closely, seeing how the palm and fingers are exactly the same as their own. And now they wish to look at the other parts of his body, indicating they would like him to strip down. Again, they clearly have genuine but not threatening interest as they poke and prod him in various parts. The young sailor at length pulls down his pants to reveal it's a yarga, a man. The whole meeting has taken some 30 minutes. Yes, everything seems to be pretty similar to their own, if only a different colour, and all appears in working order before he is encouraged to dress again. At this point, an incredulous Captain Cook will record, "They suffered him to go away without offering the least insult, and perceiving that he did not go right for the ship, they directed him which way to go." Banks, too, is fascinated by the sailor's account, less about the natives' anatomical curiosity, but their supper. He wonders in his journal, "How they had been clever enough to take these animals is almost beyond my conception, as both of them are most shy, especially the cockatoos." Later in the day, while botanizing on, Banks follows a track, and suddenly there is something completely unexpected. It is a relatively neat pile of all the clothes the white men have been giving the natives. Yes, there they are, left all in a heap together, doubtless as lumber not worth carriage. Maybe, had we looked farther, we should have found our other trinkets, for they seemed to set no value upon anything we had except our turtle, which, of all things, we were the least able to spare them. This is indeed a strange people. Early August, Endeavour River, the leaving of the boat people. On the 3rd of August, Captain Cook makes 2 attempts to sail into the teeth of the onshore wind to get the Endeavour to sea, only for the wind to blow them back to shore both times. But the late afternoon brings a blessing. The wind abates and swings around, blowing lightly offshore. Captain Cook orders the coasting anchor and cable to be laid outside the sandbar in readiness. Should the wind be fair on the morrow, they can move quickly and sure enough, with all still calm at 5 a.m. the next day, Captain Cook orders all hands to the capstan, and within minutes the cables are springing up from the water with a healthy twang, spraying water on all sides as the men take the strain. It is a long and arduous process to first get out into the channel once more, then to gather in the cables and anchors, and finally to set the sails. But by 7 a.m., with a light air from the land, they are, sure enough, slowly heading towards the barrier of reefs. Their next obstacle, to the open sea. The pinnace leads the way, sounding continually, lest they run afoul once more. 4th of August, 1770. Leaving Endeavour River, against a sea of troubles. It is time to take pause. Sometimes in sea life there is indeed the quick and the dead, but in this situation long experience has taught Captain Cook that the quick die. After anchoring in 15 fathoms in the channel, he sends Master Molyneux on his way to find the way through, and in the meantime he wishes to wait until low tide, so he can see for himself from the masthead the lie of the reef at low tide. If there proves to be no safe passage to the east or north, he will slowly sail to the south, around all the shoals, to skirt them on the eastern side. The only thing he knows for sure is that as they had got the ship in here, there must indeed be a way out. But Robert Molyneux returns with the news. There might be a way. He hasn't quite seen the promised land, but far more importantly, he has found a path to the open sea, first heading east, then north, then east again through all the shallows until they get to a half-mile break in the reefs he has found. That afternoon, from the Crow's Nest, Captain Cook can see for himself exactly what the master has reported. By heading in exactly the directions he has suggested, they will come out just beyond the spot where they have been catching all the turtles, called, let's see, Turtle Reef. The next morning, at mid-tide, the crew weigh anchors again. That light offshore wind soon freshens, however, and as it is coming from the southeast, Cook must proceed with infinite care, the pinnace going ahead to make many soundings. And so it goes. With painful precaution they proceed until nightfall, before dropping anchor to start again the next day. For yes, each night from now on they must stop, as it is too dangerous to proceed in the dark. But it is not as if the danger stops even then. The problem is that the anchors sometimes will not hold. On the night of the 6th of August, in fact, Joseph Banks wakes to the sound of shouts being added to the shrieking wind that has been buffeting the Endeavour for hours. Captain Cook, of course, is already on deck, his wise brown eyes darting to every corner of his vessel, keeping track of her hardware and sailors, dispensing orders, as calm as ever, but also fiercely focused. For this time the reef is not a bump in the night, but a looming peril in every direction. Somehow the ship has shifted in such a way that there are breakers in every direction coming at them, meaning they must be all but surrounded by submerged reefs. The menacing curling white of the enormous waves betrays the clear, if still hidden, dangers that lurk and smirk at the fat wooden prey now drifting towards destruction. Quickly, Cook has the men in the pinnace out, taking soundings in the direction the ship is drifting, and yelling out how many fathoms of safety they have. The short answer in the still shrieking wind is not much, and getting less all the time. And they are getting closer and closer to a reef. Captain Cook barks commands to midshipmen and swabs alike, in the hope that the Endeavour will be transformed into a mere bobbing cork, which the anchors will thereafter be strong enough to hold in place, keeping them off the reef. The men bob too, each so full of nerves that he cannot stand still, shifting more than the ship does, each hoping to see something that other eyes have missed, some passage unmarked, some break in the breakers that will signal safety. They look in vain. Alas, while in a harbour this would have surely worked, in the open sea the forces upon the Endeavour are just too strong, and with lurch after lurch they continue to move. By dawn of the 7th of August, when they can fully see the peril they are in, they realise that overnight the anchor has dragged. They have moved no less than a league from where they had dropped it at dusk. All up, it is extraordinary that they have moved that far and yet not finished up on one of the shoals that threaten them from all around, including the one dead astern that the wind and tide seem now intent on casting them upon. "Mr. Molyneux, see to a kedge anchor, if you please." But it is having no effect. With every passing minute, they are being driven closer and closer to destruction, and it seems nothing will be able to save them. Like Lord Sandwich in the wee hours, however, Captain Cook has one last card to play, and he plays it now. "Sheet anchor to the forecastle. Man the windlass." The kedge anchor is the anchor of last resort, the largest anchor on board, kept amidships for emergencies. So heavy it can only be dropped by a chain. It will take a good dozen of the crew to get it attached to the chain and over the side. Mercifully, however, even before that order can be executed, all of the previous moves seem to combine, and, "Belay that command," as Banks will recount, the ship stopped and held fast, to our great joy. Captain Cook does not join in the general celebration, aware as he is that they have likely just received a stay of execution, not a reprieve. For now, as the tide goes out, they can see even more terrors than before, as ever more shoals are exposed in every direction. Once again Captain Cook climbs the mast to get a better take on the overall situation. "After having well viewed our situation from the masthead, I saw that we were surrounded on every side with dangers, insomuch that I was quite at a loss which way to steer when the weather will permit us to get under sail." Master Molyneux is insistent. Once the weather breaks their way, they must beat back to the southeast, whence they came. But Captain Cook, after consideration, is even more insistent. "It would be an endless piece of work, as the winds blow constantly from that quarter, and very strong, without hardly any intermission. And even if they could get through, it would put them on the wrong side of this barrier, having to face it once more. If instead they steer to the northeast, yes, there will be shoals to dodge, but at least they have some chance of breaking through the barrier and leaving it behind them. By the by, sailing northeast, they will mostly be sailing large, with the wind astern, while doing zigzags through the reefs will see them sailing into the wind a bit too, by the wind. In order to escape, thus, they will have to sail by and large, as the Jacks say. Oh, these are the times of battering days and shattering nights, as the next 3 sunrises still see unfavourable winds and roaring waves coming at them from varying angles. Every sundown in turn sees them beginning to pray that their anchors will hold to the dawn, as it will not be possible to take corrective action until that time, should they start to slip. At least in the day the pinnace goes ahead, and they slowly, cautiously, by use of anchors and light sail, occasionally make their way through what appear to be the deepest, safest waters. On the morning of the 11th of August, they spy 3 islands up ahead, each dominated by a large hill, which is exactly what they need. Taking the pinnace, Captain Cook and Mr. Banks go to the northernmost and largest of the islands and climb the hill, with many lizards dashing out of their way as they go. Hence the name Captain Cook gives it, Lizard Island, anxious to get as close as they can to a bird's-eye view of the reefs that surround them and find a way out. "The island itself was high," Banks's journal on the 11th of August, 1770 reads. "We ascended the hill, and when we were at the top, saw plainly the grand reef still extending itself parallel with the shore, at about the distance of 3 leagues from us, or 8 from the main. Through it were several channels exactly similar to those we had seen in the islands." As always, the view reveals grim prospects. But it is possible, and after carefully noting the position of those channels, Cook and Banks descend from the hill to sleep overnight on the island before rowing back to the Endeavour the next morning. Cook is quick to give Master Molyneux his rough map of where the paths to redemption through these reefs lie, and commands him to send the pinnace forth. "Really, Captain Cook?" The master is highly reluctant, pointing out just how many shoals and reefs there are that are visible, let alone unseen ones. He is highly pessimistic about their chances of getting free without coming to grief. Cook, while more than aware of the dangers, insists that every choice from here is dangerous, so they must do their best anyway to progress. "See to it, if you please, Mr. Molyneux." Yes, most of those on board the Endeavour are now feeling grim, including the artist Sidney Parkinson, whose name is now on the daily sick list. But none appears to be feeling grimmer than Tupaia. With an unrelenting moroseness, now riding dark sentinel to his ever-ailing health, he has become an ever more troubling presence on the Endeavour, with what little energy he does have too often devoted to querulousness. He had been firmly told it would take 10 moons to get to Britain, and has counted them down ever since. When those 10 moons had at last passed, they had been still in New Holland, and his dismay and depression has deepened ever since. Does this magical place of Britain even exist? "Your account about Britain being the ship's country is a mere story," he says morosely to William Perry. "In fact, you have risen from the bottom of the sea." The surgeon's mate smiles broadly. "Which of the many strange sailing canoes you have seen in Tahiti have you known to grow in the sea?" The question gives Tupaia pause. It is a good point, but he is vexed. Nothing changes their wretched situation. "If not so," he finishes, "you have however lost your way and can never find Britain again." This time it is William Perry who takes pause. This last opinion of Tupaia, he will note, had more force than he was aware of, for at the time I speak of, my own expectation of ever returning to England was very faint. Gathered around the fire, the Kuku-Yimida talk long of these strange visitations, these ghostly men who landed at the river mouth and, with no ceremony at all, no observation of respectful requests to pass through, or to stay, gorged themselves on the land's precious bounty, trampled her plants, frightened many of the animals, and caused them to flee with the noise they make, and, most disturbingly, stole many of the ancient totem, the turtle, before finally, blessedly, leaving on their great spirit bird. The fire magic has worked. The Wangar, spirits of dead Kuku-Yimida ancestors, are gone. All that remains is for the elders to weave accounts of this troubling event, these strange spirits, into the sacred stories that have been passed down to them from their own ancestors, the very tales of all the spirits that have created and sustained their world through the ages, the very lore the young ones around the fire will one day tell to their own children. Then, finally, one day, they watched the ship sail out of the Wallambalbiri and away from our Kuku-Yimida land. We called them Wangar, spirits of our dead ancestors, and that name is still used to this day. Such is the dreaming. Chapter 13. Outward Bound. For the first time these 3 months we were this day out of sight of land, to our no small satisfaction. That very ocean which had formerly been looked upon with terror by maybe all of us, was now the asylum we had long wished for, and at last found. Satisfaction was clearly painted in every man's face. Joseph Banks, 14th of August, 1770. Batavia, formerly called Jocatra, is situated in a very large open bay, in which is a great number of low islands. It is walled round, and has many canals cut through it. Sidney Parkinson, 1770. Batavia is certainly a place that Europeans need not covet to go to, but if necessity obliges them, they will do well to make their stay as short as possible. Otherwise they will soon feel the effects of the unwholesome air of Batavia, which, I firmly believe, is the death of more Europeans than any other place upon the globe of the same extent. Captain Cook. Description of Batavia, 26th of December, 1770. 15th of August, 1770. HMS Endeavour, the open sea. In his entire 23 years at sea, Captain Cook has never seen the like. Yes, the day before, they had at last found passage through the reef before tacking to the north, and had soon left the long line of shoals in their wake. But now that dawn has risen on the new day, Captain Cook gasps just to see it. Dead ahead and stretching forever, yet more reef. Truly, James Cook cannot believe how vast this thing is. We saw a reef between us and the land, extending away to the southward, and as we thought, terminated here to the northward abreast of us. But this was only an opening, for soon after we saw it extend away to the northward, as far as we could distinguish anything. With infinite care, thus, Cook sets a northerly course, and continues until the night closes in, whereupon he tacks and stands to the southeast, fearing getting too close to the reef in a night as black as pitch. After some 2 miles, the night air falls still as a tomb, and the Endeavour is becalmed in water so deep 140-fathom line can't find the bottom. The best they can do is hope that they are far enough away from the reefs to get through the night without being cast upon them, only for Captain Cook to wake with a start at 4 a.m. to the unmistakable sound of roiling surf breaking on what must be a not-so-distant reef. Cook paces the deck, straining both his eyes and ears for a clue about the level of danger. It's loud, so it's likely dangerous. As his vision extends for no more than a few yards of the deck, his key hope is that the terrifying roaring sound of the breakers on the reefs will grow fainter. Alas, alas, it does not, and all sailors with him on deck know it. Rarely they have felt so far from home as now. At any second, it seems, they might hit yet another crop of coral down here in the unexplored South Seas, far beyond the edges of the known world. And that would be that. Their fates a mystery to those at home forever, their bodies sacrificed on the altar of the reef, their endeavour and their endeavour lost, all for naught. As the black sky lifts a little to grey, Captain Cook makes out vast foaming breakers crashing down on, yes, a very nearby reef. "Not a mile from us," records the captain, and every surge of the swell is carrying them ever closer to it. Drop the anchors? If only they could. "We had at this time not an air of wind," Captain Cook chronicles, "and the depth of the water was unfathomable, so that there was not a possibility of anchoring. In this distressed situation, we had nothing but Providence," records the captain, invoking the Lord's divine protection for the first time since they had sailed from England. On the chance that God won't help, however, he also has another plan. "Bo'sun, see to your oarsmen, and launch the longboat and yawl." The pinnace, alas, is currently under repair, with a plank missing from its hull. But they will likely need it. Captain Cook barks orders to start repairing the pinnace now. With a rush, the first of the two boats is lowered, while a flurry of sawing and hammering breaks out around the pinnace. In the meantime, as chronicled by Banks, 2 large oars or sweeps were got out at the stern ports to pull the ship's head round the other way, in hopes that might delay till the boats were out. In the absence of rudder steerage, it is the only hope they have of turning the ship away from danger. Yes, these are desperate times, requiring desperate measures. Redoubling their efforts, the rest of the crews soon have the yawl and the longboat out before the bow, a long cable strung from each and fastened securely to the ship. In a few minutes, they'll know if they will live or die. And stroke, and stroke, and stroke. Row, row, row your 400-ton ship merrily away from the reef. Their red-faced, grunting efforts indeed slow the Endeavour's approach to the reef, but it does not arrest it, and by 6 a.m. she is not above 80 or 100 yards from the breakers. And still the men sounding the depths cannot feel the bottom. The air is filled with salt spray. Another wave lifts the Endeavour high and surges her forward to the reef, dropping the ship just before it is surely dashed to splinters. And the next wave surges towards them. Sure as night and day. Stroke, men, stroke! The same sea that washed the side of the ship rose in a breaker prodigiously high the very next time it did rise, Cook chronicles, so that between us and destruction was only a dismal valley, the breadth of one wave, and even now no ground could be felt within 120 fathoms. For the first time in his life, despite his projection of calm, Captain Cook is quietly convinced the battle is lost. Any moment now they could very likely drown like rats. Yet in this truly terrible situation, he will chronicle proudly, not one man ceased to do his utmost, and that with as much calmness as if no danger had been near. All the dangers we had escaped were little in comparison. Captain Cook is not alone in his gloomy forecast. Every man Jack among them feels the same, starting with Joseph Banks. A speedy death was all we had to hope for, and that from the vastness of the breakers which must quickly dash the ship all to pieces was scarce to be doubted. But they are not quite done for yet. Stand by to lower the pinnace. Normally, under such circumstances, a newly repaired boat would be lowered first, with 1 or 2 men only, to see if it floats. But there is no time. It is lowered with a full crew on the reckoning that it must float, and go to the assistance of the other boats, or all is lost anyway. And it does float. The men row ahead to where they join the jacks in the other two boats, heaving with all their might to get the ship clear of the breakers. Still the rollers surge upon the reef, each one lifting up His Majesty's ship, carrying her a few yards forward and depositing her in the valley between waves, closer to doom. The 30 men in the 3 small vessels continue to haul with everything they have, making no headway until it happens. Is it? Yes, a breath of wind. It is, as Joseph Banks notes, so small that at any other time in a calm we should not have observed it. But at this time it is more than merely observed. It is hailed as a miracle, as it is the only chance they have to live. Could it be Providence after all? Make sail, Mr. Molyneux. Make sail they do, the jack-tars following the master's orders. Sharp up to starboard. Be ready to right the helm, to get as much canvas up as possible to capture the breath of God. In less than a minute, the result is obvious. It is working. The wind has checked their progress towards catastrophe, and the ship is now moving a very little on slanting direction away from the breakers. Alas, alas, as wonderful as the small breeze is, after just 10 minutes it falls away, to such a point that a strong debate breaks out about which direction exactly the minute wind is now currently blowing in. Banks watches in disbelief as Cook throws small pieces of paper overboard to see where the tiny breeze might take them, or if any evidence of a breeze can be seen. It cannot. Once more, destruction beckons, when again God lightly whistles a hymn in their direction, for, as Banks records, our little friendly breeze now visited us again, and lasted about as long as before, thrusting us possibly 100 yards farther from the breakers. We were still, however, in the very jaws of destruction. And yet perhaps the Lord might visit one more miracle upon them. For there it is. About a furlong up ahead, they suddenly see an exceedingly small opening in the reef, so narrow it is only a little wider than their ship is long. By one measure it is madness to think they could get their ship through it. On the other hand, they have no choice, and if they can get through it, they can already see calm waters that wait on the other side. The fear of death is bitter, Banks records. The prospect we now had before us, of saving our lives, made my heart set much lighter on its throne, and I suppose there were none but what felt the same sensations. Now the yawl and the pinnace are set in different directions, no longer trying in unison to pull the Endeavour out of the breaking swell, but instead in opposition to one another, each tug correcting the course bit by bit, trying to make the mighty ship veer towards the tiny gap in the reef. There is one exception to the all-in straining, or at least furious focus from the gunwales, for in a display so very typical of him, the astronomer Charles Green chooses this time to shoot the sun and calculate their longitude. After all, if they are about to die, they may as well know where they are dying. These observations were very good, Green will record blithely. The limbs of the sun and moon very distinct, and a good horizon. We were about 100 yards from the reef, where we expected the ship to strike every minute, the swell heaving us right on. Lieutenant Hicks, meanwhile, orders the men in the pinnace to row alongside the ship, where he calls up to the quarterdeck. "Captain, the opening is narrow, but it is a good anchorage, and there is a passage quite free from shoals." For all of Lieutenant Hicks's optimism, and all of their prayers, it still does not seem very likely. And yet perhaps the Lord is watching over them after all, for now all of the tides, their comrades hauling oars in the boats, and Providence itself seem to be with them, as they indeed nudge towards this propitious opening. But it is not to be. Instead, An ebbing tide proves the solution. Gushing outward through the opening in the reef, it carries the Endeavour in the opposite direction intended. But nevertheless, they are out of the breakers, into a new kind of hell. Around noon, Captain Cook records, "We had got an offing of 1.5 or 2 miles, yet we could hardly flatter ourselves with hopes of getting clear, even if a breeze should spring up, as we were by this time embayed by the reef, and the ship, in spite of our endeavours, driving before the sea into the bight. The ebb had been in our favour, and we had reason to suppose the flood which was now made would be against us." Yes, ebb and flow, give and take, by and large, the incoming tide will undoubtedly drive them back towards mortal peril. In desperation, Captain Cook climbs the mast to look for any option that doesn't look like certain destruction. There. It is another deep opening in the reef, a mile to the westward. Lieutenant Hicks is immediately sent forth to examine the possibilities, and he returns soon with his views. Narrow, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But without doubt it is their only hope. So they try, their efforts being met with a blessing. A light breeze soon after sprung up at east-northeast, with which the help of our boats and a flood tide we soon entered the opening, and was hurried through in a short time by a rapid tide like a mill race, which kept us from driving against either side, though the channel was not more than 1/4 of a mile broad. Having entered a kind of coral harbour, Banks notes the irony of their situation. 2 days ago, our utmost wishes were crowned by getting without the reef, and today we were made again happy by getting within it. For now, Captain Cook has the men drop anchor to secure the ship for the moment, but their ordeal is far from over. Right now, the key problem is to continue to survive, and Captain Cook is under no further illusions. He has learnt his lesson, twice, and now he must change course. Given that 10 leagues off the shores of New Holland in these parts there appears to be an all but impenetrable maze of reefs, which extend south to north for a distance unknown, the only way to lift their chances of survival is to stay squarely to the west of those reefs, and sail north in the calmer passage of water that lies between the reef and the mainland. At least this way, if they get into trouble again, and if the ship is lost, they might be able to get some of the men safely on land. Captain Cook further decides to make no more landings on this coast other than for water. They must get to Batavia, the key port of the Dutch East Indies, to treat the growing number of sick men and to rest. Although no reasonable man could disagree with this course of action, Captain Cook remains all too aware that an unreasonable man named Alexander Dalrymple awaits in London, likely all too ready to criticise him, and so he includes a rare piece of explanation and reflection in the log about the pressures, pleasures, and problems of the leader employed as a discoverer. Is it worth it? And what will armchair critics say of the perils undergone and foregone? Captain Cook has little doubt. People will hardly admit of an excuse for a man leaving a coast unexplored he has once discovered. After all, he is here on a voyage of discovery. If the dangers are his excuse, the captain opines, he is then charged with timorousness and want of perseverance, and at once pronounced to be the most unfit man in the world to be employed as a discoverer. If, on the other hand, he boldly encounters all the dangers and obstacles he meets with, and is unfortunate enough not to succeed, he is then charged with temerity, and perhaps want of conduct. It seems he can't win either way. Observe the dangers, you are a coward. Ignore the dangers and fall foul, you are a fallen fool. The former of these aspersions, I am confident, can never be laid to my charge, and if I am fortunate to surmount all the dangers we meet with, the latter will never be brought in question. Although I must own that I have engaged more among the islands and shoals upon this coast than perhaps in prudence I ought to have done with a single ship." His reasoning chronicled, his defence put in place against whatever charge Mr. Dalrymple might lay against him, Captain Cook keeps the Endeavour moving up the east coast of New Holland, always on the lookout for the coastline to finally fall away. Oh, and reefs, of course, and ideally a passage to the west to be revealed. For yes, it really is time to now get home. 22nd of August, 1770, Possession Island, in the name of His British Majesty. They first see it on the 21st of August. The north trending coast falls away to the west, just as James Cook had hoped. Looking through his spyglass from the crow's nest, it is clear that he and his men have at last reached the northernmost tip of New Holland, and there is indeed what appears to be a westward passage. The next morning, 22nd of August, 1770, the Endeavour drops anchor beside an island just to the west of what Captain Cook has named Cape York, and he is shortly being rowed ashore by 10 marines in the company of Mr. Banks, the doctor, and Mr. Green, whereupon, as flitting black figures recede in the distance, the 4 of them climb to the top of the island's highest hill, barely 3 times the height of the Endeavour's mastheads, and Captain Cook turns his spyglass west. With expert eyes, scanning back and forth, with the others watching him earnestly, seeking a sign about whether the gods are with them or agin them, it does not take long. Cook finally smiles, a rare enough event to be worthy of remark. It bodes well. There is a way through, a strait, at least as far as we could see, without any obstruction, which, from appearances, should get them out of deep trouble and into deep water. Hurrah! It is the difference between being able to go fairly directly west to the Dutch colony of Batavia, or being forced to turn back and go all the way around the top of New Guinea, a difference of many weeks, and likely of life and death for many of the exhausted, ailing crew. And now, after descending the hill to rejoin the marines, all in their rather tattered and faded red coats and tricorn hats, for they have been ordered to dress as formally as they can for the occasion, it is time to perform a particular ceremony, which is the second reason that Cook has come ashore. Now, ideally, Captain Cook could follow instructions from Admiralty to the letter, and, with the consent of the natives, take possession of convenient situations in the country in the name of the King of Great Britain. But, under the circumstances, claiming possession with the consent of the natives is simply not possible. The natives parley with the white men when they want, not the other way round, for they are the masters of this domain. And, as ever in New Holland, they had simply melted away as soon as the white spirit people had set ghostly feet upon this small island, leaving no one in the vicinity who could consent. First, the Union Jack is taken from its pack, attached to a flagpole and lifted high. Now, taking the letters patent from his inside pocket, Captain Cook reads, "George, by the grace of God, King of England, know ye that of our special grace, certain science and mere motion, we have given and granted free liberty and license from time to time, and at all times for ever hereafter, to discover, find, search out, and view such remote, heathen and barbarous lands, countries and territories not actually possessed of any Christian prince or people, as to King George, his heirs, and to every or any of them shall seem good, and to have, hold, occupy, and enjoy to him, his heirs, for ever, with all commodities, jurisdictions, and royalties both by sea and land, and our heirs and successors shall go and travel thither, to inhabit or remain there, to build and fortify at our discretion." And so, in the name of King George III, Captain Cook does hereby claim for Great Britain the eastern coast of New Holland, from the latitude of 38 degrees south down to this place. At the conclusion of his words, the Marines, with their muskets pointed to the sky, followed the barked commands of Sergeant Edgecombe and fire off 3 volleys. They are answered by 3 joyous volleys from the ship. It is done. From the point of view of Great Britain, this land is now the sovereign territory of Great Britain. The ancient land itself does not blink, just as her ancient people have not the tiniest awareness of the significance of what has occurred. And, in fact, for Captain Cook personally, it is not of particular note, being accorded just a scant few lines in his journal, while Joseph Banks doesn't even give it that. It is no more than a small task, as ordered by the Admiralty, ticked off at the last possible moment. Once accomplished, it will be for the wise heads of London, much later, to decide what weight to give it. But what to call this eastern side of New Holland, of which he has just taken possession? It is no great southern land, but at least it can be a southern something. After some consideration, Cook writes it down in his log, South Wales, on the grounds that much of the topography of this coast reminds him of that place. Yes, that's it. Later, he will remember there is already a place near Ontario, named New Wales. So, with a couple of strokes of his pen, just as he had modified the name of Stingray Bay to Botany Bay, he will change it to New South Wales. For Banks's part, aware that they are finally leaving New Holland, or New Wales, he takes the opportunity to record his own reflections on the country and its inhabitants. Upon the whole, New Holland, though in every respect the most barren country I have seen, is not so bad, but that between the productions of sea and land, a company of people who should have the misfortune of being shipwrecked upon it might support themselves, even by the resources that we have seen. A place to start a colony, perhaps? Joseph Banks does not even raise the possibility. And yet his next words at least make clear that if Britain does pursue that path, resistance from the locals, in strict contrast to the situation in New Zealand, will likely be minimal at best. This immense tract of land, the largest known which does not bear the name of a continent, as it is considerably larger than all Europe, is thinly inhabited, even to admiration, at least that part of it that we saw. We never but once saw so many as 30 Indians together, and that was a family. Perhaps there might be a large population inland? No, Joseph Banks is sure the inland is totally uninhabited. As a matter of fact, Banks notes that New Holland has a soil so barren and at the same time entirely void of the help derived from cultivation could not be supposed to yield much towards the support of man. And now for one of the most puzzling things about the natives. In the simple way they live, these people don't seem to want anything, and they don't steal. The virtues of such a simple life are obvious to Banks. From them appear how small are the real wants of human nature, which we Europeans have increased to an excess, which would certainly appear incredible to these people, could they be told it. Nor shall we cease to increase them as long as luxuries can be invented and riches found for the purchase of them. And how soon these luxuries degenerate into necessaries may be sufficiently evinced by the universal use of strong liquors, tobacco, spices, tea, etc., etc. Captain Cook's own thoughts run along similar lines. These people may truly be said to be in the pure state of nature, he will note, and may appear to some to be the most wretched upon earth. But in reality, they are far more happier than we Europeans, being wholly unacquainted not only with the superfluous, but also of the necessary conveniences so much sought after in Europe. They are happy in not knowing the use of them. They live in a tranquillity which is not disturbed by the inequality of condition. The earth and sea of their own accord furnishes them with all things necessary for life. They covet not magnificent houses, household stuff, etc., They sleep as sound in a small hovel, or even in the open, as the king in his palace on a bed of down. The Endeavour's crew weigh anchor, set the sails, and follow the sun as she falls towards yonder horizon. 17th of September, 1770, Savu, a rum rajah and a Dutch treat. As close as the Endeavour is now drawing to Batavia, its crew is closer still to running out of supplies. Scurvy also stalks close, sending newly ill sailors to Surgeon Monkhouse almost daily. Almost all of the renewed supplies from New Holland have been eaten. There is no salted beef left, nor sea biscuit. Certainly no vegetables. They have not eaten vegetables in weeks. They can barely remember what fruit tastes like. They simply must stop for supplies at the nearest port, which proves to be the small island of Savu, where, as Cook rhapsodizes, "We saw houses, coconut trees, and a flock of cattle graze, and these were temptations hardly to be withstood by people in our situation." Lieutenant Gore is sent ashore as emissary for Captain Cook, and is most surprised to find himself greeted outside the gates of the Rajah's palace by a curiously ragtag yet charming kind of dark man in a sarong and coat, who turns out to be the Rajah of Savu himself. In a welcome change, the Rajah, the leader of the native population under the yoke of the Dutch, proves to be entirely open to all of Lieutenant Gore's requests. Fruit? Livestock? Wine, water, whatever you like. Of course we here in Savu can help you poor Britishers. We would be simply delighted. Lieutenant Gore beams, relieved that their storerooms and bellies will be empty no more. But there is just one thing. The only complication is that they must involve a representative from the Dutch East India Company. You understand? Of course. That representative, another rather ragtag fellow, though indeed a Dutchman, Johan Lange, arrives a few hours later and proves as eager to trade with the Endeavour as it is with him. Wonderful. Cook and his crew are saved, and the market is open. Although there is just one more thing. The Rajah and Mr. Lange would love, if it's not too much trouble of course, to come aboard the Endeavour and dine with them. Well, yes, sure, but we are a little low on supplies.
This ends CD 15.